The Clone Wars burned for 3 years. By the time they ended, the Galactic Republic was gone, the Jedi Order was destroyed, and the galaxy belonged to an empire. What follows covers only the first year, from the political origins of the war, through the battles, betrayals, and failures that locked the Republic onto a path it could not escape. The Republic did not stumble into this conflict, it was engineered into one. Chancellor Palpatine governed the Republic while commanding the Separatist movement through his Sith apprentice, Count Dooku. Under that manufactured war, the Jedi became generals and clones proved their worth in a system that would never recognize it. The Senate surrendered authority to a Chancellor who would never return it, and Anakin Skywalker began forming the bonds that Palpatine would one day use to break him. Year 1 covers the war's opening operational phase, primarily 22 BBY per Star Wars timelines published by DK in 2023. Some events in the final chapters may cross into early 21 BBY. They're included because the war's opening campaigns formed a continuous narrative. Every claim is drawn from canon sources only. Chapter 1: The First Day. Everything that followed traced back to one day, Geonosis. In a matter of hours, the Republic gained an army, the Jedi lost a generation, and one man tightened his grip on the entire galaxy. Geonosis was a barren desert world in the Outer Rim, home to an insectoid species and dominated by droid foundries producing battle droids for the Separatist cause. It housed the largest Separatist military concentration in the galaxy, and it was where the Clone Wars ignited. 212 Jedi would deploy to that world. Only 29 would come back. But that massacre did not happen in isolation. Before the arena, before the army, the war's true foundations were laid years earlier inside the Galactic Senate. The Military Creation Act had stalled in the Republic Senate. The bill proposed authorizing a centralized standing army for the Galactic Republic, an institution that had not maintained one for generations. Planetary defense forces and the Jedi Order had been sufficient during peacetime. Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo led the opposition. She argued that raising a military would provoke the growing Separatist movement rather than contain it. Her position held the swing votes. As long as Amidala remained on the Senate floor, the bill would not pass. Palpatine needed her removed. The assassination chain accomplished that. Count Dooku hired the Mandalorian bounty hunter Jango Fett. Fett hired a clawed-eyed shapeshifter named Zam Wesell. Wesell made 2 attempts on Amidala's life on Coruscant. Both failed. But the attempts achieved their true purpose. The Jedi Council assigned Obi-Wan Kenobi to investigate the plot's origin, and Anakin Skywalker to escort Amidala to safety on Naboo. Both assignments pulled critical players away from the capital. Obi-Wan's investigation led him to Kamino, and Anakin's protective detail took him to the Lake Country. The Senate opposition collapsed without Amidala's presence. With Amidala gone, the path to emergency powers opened. Representative Jar Jar Binks of Naboo served in her place. Maz Ameda, the Shagrian vice chair of the Senate and a close operative of Chancellor Palpatine, approached Binks directly and urged him to act in the face of the Separatist threat. Binks proposed that the Senate grant Palpatine emergency executive powers. The Senate voted in favor. The Military Creation Act itself was never brought to a formal vote. Emergency powers rendered it unnecessary. Palpatine could now authorize a military without Senate debate, without committee oversight, without an expiration date. Those powers gave the Chancellor sole authority to deploy armed forces and bypass peacetime regulation. In a single session, the Galactic Senate surrendered its military authority to one man. No one set a time limit or demanded conditions. That single vote would cost the Republic everything. Palpatine already had an army waiting. Obi-Wan's trail had led him to Kamino, a remote ocean world conspicuously absent from the Jedi archives. Its records had been erased. On Kamino, Obi-Wan discovered a massive cloning facility producing soldiers at industrial scale. Prime Minister Lama Su informed him that 200,000 units were ready, with 1 million more well on the way. The precise meaning of that number was unclear, Whether a unit referred to a single clone trooper or a larger military formation was never clarified at the time. The soldiers were clones of one man, Jango Fett. Fett lived on Kamino, serving as the Army's genetic template and combat training advisor. He had negotiated a single, unaltered clone as a separate condition alongside his financial compensation. That boy, Boba Fett, would grow into one of the galaxy's most feared bounty hunters. But that lay years ahead. What mattered now was who had ordered the army in the first place. The Kaminoans stated that a Jedi Master named Sifo-Dyas had placed the original order roughly a decade earlier. Sifo-Dyas had served on the Jedi Council. He foresaw a coming galactic war through visions in the Force. The Council dismissed his warnings and removed him. Later, canon sources confirmed the full scope of the conspiracy. The Clone Wars Season 6 and Dooku Jedi Lost established that Sifo-Dyas was murdered and his identity co-opted by the Sith to manage the project through intermediaries. Tales of the Jedi show Dooku erasing Kamino from the Jedi archives. None of this was known when Obi-Wan arrived. What he found was a fully operational army built on a dead man's name, waiting for a republic that had never ordered it. Palpatine activated the clone army the same day the Senate granted him emergency powers. The Republic did not ask who funded it, it asked how quickly it could deploy it. 212 Jedi had already departed for Geonosis. Most of them would never return. Obi-Wan had been captured after infiltrating a Separatist gathering on the planet. He discovered that the Confederacy's founding leadership had assembled on Geonosis. Count Dooku, Newt Gunray of the Trade Federation, Poggle the Lesser of the Geonosins, San Hill of the Banking Clan, Wat Tambor of the Techno Union, and Shu Mai of the Commerce Guild. Droid foundries across the planet were producing battle droids at enormous scale. Obi-Wan transmitted his findings to the Jedi Council before Geonosian forces captured him. Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala attempted a rescue from Naboo. They were also captured, and all three were sentenced to public execution in the Petranaki Arena. Mace Windu refused to wait for the clone army to arrive. He assembled a Jedi strike team of 212 and flew to Geonosis. Not all of them fought inside the arena. Some were deployed against the orbital defense cannons protecting the planet. Others flew starfighter support over the desert. The 212 represented the total Jedi force committed to the rescue. Inside the arena, the situation collapsed within minutes. Geonosian warriors flooded in from every tunnel entrance. Battle droids poured through the gates. 3 execution beasts, a Reek, a Nexu, and an Acklay tore across the arena floor. The Jedi fought with lightsabers in a confined space with no cover, no tactical advantage, and enemies closing from every direction. Blaster fire came from the stands, from the gates, and from droid formations assembling on the arena floor itself. The Jedi had trained for duels, not for suppressive fire from 300 directions. The sheer density of incoming fire turned lightsaber deflection into a survival exercise, and Jedi were struck down before they could establish defensive formations. Jedi Council member Coleman Trebor, a Verk, reached Count Dooku's observation balcony and moved to engage him. Jango Fett shot Trebor twice in the chest from close range. Trebor fell from the balcony. During the same battle, Mace Windu confronted Fett directly. Windu closed the distance through blaster fire and killed Fett with a single lightsaber strike. The genetic template for the entire clone army died in the same arena where those clones would soon arrive to fight. Across the arena and the desert above, the Jedi fell in numbers the Order had not seen in a millennium. Jedi Master Semper Vey was hit by a Geonosian sonic blast during the chaotic retreat from the arena. Her Padawan, a young Jedi named Escada Karis, witnessed her die. As Delilah S. Dawson depicted in Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, Akaris carried that trauma for the rest of her life. It fed her isolation, deepened her anger, and ultimately drove her into the Empire's Inquisitorius program. Of the 212 Jedi who went to Geonosis, only 29 returned to Coruscant. Yoda arrived with the first wave of clone troopers before the last surviving Jedi in the arena was overrun. Republic assault ships descended onto the desert plains. 200,000 clone soldiers deployed in formation against a Separatist droid army that vastly outnumbered them. The Republic caught the Separatists still loading transport ships at their staging areas. That narrow window of surprise was the only tactical edge the clones possessed. The battle that followed was enormous and brutal. Republic gunships strafed droid formations across open desert. ATTE walkers pushed through defensive lines, while LAAT transports dropped reinforcements behind Separatist positions. Self-propelled homing spider droids and Hellfire tanks tore through clone positions in return. Gunships were shot from the sky. Clone squads that had been deployed minutes earlier were wiped out before they could reach their designated rally points. Casualties were severe on both sides, but the clones adapted under fire. Units that lost their commanding officers reorganized around surviving sergeants and continued advancing. They had been engineered for exactly this. The Separatist army suffered heavy losses on the surface, but Dooku's forces retreated with the majority of their fleet and droid reserves intact. Geonosis itself was never secured. The planet remained in Separatist hands, and its droid foundries continued production. The Republic celebrated a victory. In practical terms, the Confederacy had simply pulled back to fight another day. But the most consequential events of Geonosis unfolded away from the main battle. Count Dooku retreated to a hangar on the outskirts of the battlefield. Obi-Wan and Anakin pursued him. Dooku fought with a refined precision built on decades of experience. He had trained under Yoda himself and had spent a lifetime mastering lightsaber combat. Against Obi-Wan, he struck with controlled efficiency, wounding him with Force lightning before landing blade strikes to the arm and thigh. Against Anakin, he was dismissive. Anakin lost his right arm to Dooku's blade in a single stroke. Yoda arrived and engaged Dooku directly. The two fought with the Force and with lightsabers. Dooku could not overcome his former master. Instead, he used the Force to collapse a heavy support pillar towards the wounded Obi-Wan and Anakin. Yoda caught the pillar rather than Perse, and Dooku escaped. He flew directly to Coruscant and landed in the abandoned industrial sector known as the Works. There, Dooku delivered the Death Star plans to Darth Sidious. Blueprints for a planet-killing battle station now rested in the hands of the man who also controlled the Republic Senate. Before departing Geonosis, Dooku had revealed something to Obi-Wan that should have ended the war before it started. He told Obi-Wan that a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious controlled the Galactic Senate. It was the truth. Every word was accurate. Obi-Wan reported the claim to the Jedi Council. Mace Windu concluded that Dooku was attempting to undermine trust in the Republic and divide its allies. Yoda noted that the dark side clouded the Jedi's ability to perceive the truth. That admission should have given the Council pause. It did not. If the Council had investigated the claim seriously, the Republic might have discovered its Chancellor before the war matured. The Sith Lord who controlled the Senate remained undetected. The Jedi would not revisit Dooku's warning for years. In the quiet aftermath, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala returned to Naboo. They married in secret in the Lake Country, on a terrace overlooking the water. A Naboo holy man officiated. The only guests were C-3PO and R2-D2. No Jedi attended. No senator was informed. The marriage violated the Jedi Code's strict prohibition on attachment. Anakin was 19. He had just lost his right arm. He carried grief and violence from Tatooine that he had confided to no one except Padme. The full weight of that burden would emerge later. For now, the bond was sealed, and that bond would become the deepest vulnerability in Anakin Skywalker's life. Palpatine would use it to destroy him. The first day was over, and the Clone Wars had begun. Palpatine held emergency powers with no expiration. The Republic had accepted a clone army of unknown origin without scrutiny. The Jedi had sent 212 of their own to Geonosis and buried most of them in the sand. The Separatists had retreated with the bulk of their forces intact, guaranteeing a prolonged war. Anakin had married in secret, and the Death Star plans were in the hands of the Sith. None of it was accidental. Each visible step had a visible explanation. The assassination led to an investigation. The investigation revealed an army. The army met a war. Each event appeared reactive. None of it was. The Clone Wars were not a conflict between the Republic and the Confederacy. They were a mechanism assembled by one man to destroy the Jedi, dissolve the Republic, and deliver an empire. Dooku told Obi-Wan the truth on Geonosis. The Jedi dismissed it. The war could have ended that day, but Palpatine had already ensured it would not. Chapter 2: Knights to Generals. The Republic won Geonosis. Now, it had to figure out how to fight a galactic war with an order of Force-sensitive monks and an army of strangers. The answer came fast, and the Jedi never recovered from it. Within days of Geonosis, the Jedi Order underwent its most dramatic transformation in a generation. The temple on Coruscant held a wartime knighting ceremony beneath the great tree in the training courtyard, with Mace Windu presiding. Senior Padawans who had not yet completed the formal Jedi trials were elevated to the rank of knight based on wartime need alone. Anakin Skywalker stood among them, 19 years old, recommended by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan himself was promoted to Jedi Master and placed on the Council, filling the seats vacated by Coleman Trevor's death on Geonosis through a rotation of Jedi Masters whose permanence was never clarified. As Mike Chen depicted in Brotherhood, the ceremony carried an urgency the Order had never felt before. Peacetime standards had been abandoned. The war demanded Jedi in the field, and the Temple provided them. The contradiction at the heart of the Order was immediate. Within hours of the ceremony, Mace Windu addressed the newly knighted Jedi. His words carried echoes of what he told Chancellor Palpatine just days earlier on Geonosis, that the Jedi were keepers of the peace, not soldiers. He believed it. The Council believed it. And yet, every knight standing beneath that tree was about to be handed a battalion of clone troopers and sent to the front lines of a galactic war. No one in the Jedi Temple offered a satisfying explanation for how both things could be true. The Jedi had defined themselves as peacekeepers for 1,000 years. That identity was now gone. The Council treated the shift as temporary, but it was not. The transition extended beyond the Temple. Across the galaxy, Jedi who had spent their careers mediating trade disputes or studying the Force in remote enclaves were now expected to lead clone battalions into combat. Many had never commanded troops, and some had never witnessed sustained fighting outside a training hall. The archives held centuries of lightsaber technique and Force philosophy, but almost nothing on military logistics, battlefield medicine, or the coordination of armored infantry. Clone officers fill some of those gaps, drawing on their accelerated training to compensate. But the command structure was clear. A Jedi general led each unit. The clones followed orders. Whether those orders were sound depended on whether the general giving them had learned to think like a soldier. Most had not. The Order was learning warfare in real time, under fire, with lives depending on decisions made by commanders who had been monks a week earlier. The fractures inside the Jedi Order appeared almost immediately, and the first came from the most unexpected source. A Zabrak initiate named Mil Alabeth approached Anakin inside the Jedi Temple. Mil possessed powerful emphatic abilities through the Force. She could feel the emotions of others with overwhelming intensity. Proximity to violence and combat caused her severe physical distress, sometimes nausea so acute that she could not stand. Mil told Anakin that she had no desire to wield her lightsaber. She wanted to help people, not fight them. But Anakin had just been knighted into a war he believed in. He stood across a child who could feel the suffering that war produced and wanted no part of it. And no answer came. Mil represented something the Council had no framework for. A Jedi whose gifts were incompatible with the role the Order had just accepted. The Force expressed itself through her in a way that rejected the war entirely. This was not dissent, it was misalignment. This conversation never made it into the Temple archives. And while Mil challenged the Order's direction, Anakin was already turning to the one person the Jedi should have feared most. Within the broader events of the Cato Neimoidia crisis depicted in Brotherhood, Anakin confessed the Tusken Raider massacre to Chancellor Palpatine. He went to Palpatine rather than Obi-Wan, the Council, or any fellow knight, and the choice itself revealed how isolated Anakin had already become within the Order. Obi-Wan was his closest ally, but Obi-Wan represented the Jedi Code, and the Code would have demanded consequences. Palpatine demanded nothing. The confession was devastating. On Tatooine, weeks before Geonosis, Anakin had returned to find his mother Shmi tortured and dying in a Tusken Raider camp. Rage fueled by the dark side consumed him. He slaughtered the entire camp. Anakin had told only Padme at the time, in a moment of raw grief on Naboo. Now, he told the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. Palpatine responded with understanding. He offered comfort rather than condemnation, framing the massacre as a natural response to grief, something any loving son would feel. The confession was never reported to the Jedi Council. That restraint was calculated. Palpatine had positioned himself as the only person in Anakin's life who accepted him without judgment, without correction, and without the burden of the Jedi Code. The bond between them deepened with each conversation, each reassurance, each quiet act of acceptance. Anakin was being pulled away from the Order one confession at a time, and he could not see it happening. Meanwhile, the war's first contested mission tested whether the Jedi could function as military commanders. The Jedi Council deployed Mace Windu with a handpicked team to the jungle world of Hisrich. Kit Fisto, Prasad Dibs, and Reza Mano accompanied him. Their mission was to investigate Separatist activity on a planet the Republic had largely ignored. Hisrich was remote, sparsely populated, and of little strategic value to the wider war. What the team found changed the nature of the mission entirely. A massive energy harvesting operation was strip mining the world's natural resources under Separatist direction. Civilians had been displaced from their homes, native species were dying, and the jungle was being destroyed sector by sector to fuel Separatist war production. The Council had sent 4 Jedi to investigate. What they needed was an army. Prasad Dibs saw what the other Jedi preferred not to see. Dibs was a Maraluka, a species born without eyes who perceived the world entirely through the Force. On Hisrich, he witnessed civilian casualties firsthand. The sight broke something in him. He challenged Windu's leadership openly, accusing the Jedi Council of warmongering and arguing that the Order had abandoned its principles the moment it agreed to serve as the Republic's military arm. The Jedi had no business leading armies. Dibs insisted. The mission on Hisrich was proof. Innocent people were dying, and the Jedi had placed themselves in the middle of a war they could have refused. Windu held firm. He argued that the Jedi had a duty to protect the innocent, and that walking away from the war could leave billions undefended. Dibs rejected the argument. His challenge escalated from verbal dissent to violence. For the first time in living memory, a Jedi raised a blade against the Council over the morality of the war. Mace subdued him without lasting injury. As depicted in Jedi of the Republic, Mace Windu, issues 1 through 5, the aftermath was swift. The Jedi Council found Dibs guilty of insubordination and treason, and Ki-Adi-Mundi delivered the verdict. Mace advocated for rehabilitation over execution and recommended that Dibs be confined to work in the Jedi archives. A Jedi Master who had challenged the morality of the war was removed from active service in the first weeks of the conflict. The dissent was silenced. The underlying argument about the Order's role in the war was never addressed. Dibs was not the only Jedi who saw what the conflict was costing, but he was one of the first to say it aloud, and the Council's response made the price of speaking clear. The message carried through the temple: serve the war or be removed from it. This was not an isolated fracture, it was a pattern, and at the same time, a new enemy had emerged from the shadows of the Confederacy. Brotherhood established Asajj Ventress's first canon encounters with Obi-Wan and Anakin during the Cato Neimoidia crisis. Ventress was a Dathomirian Night Sister, a member of an ancient Force-sensitive clan from the planet Dathomir, trained by Count Dooku as his personal assassin. She wielded twin red lightsabers and fought with a ferocity that matched most Jedi Knights in single combat. Dooku deployed her as a targeted weapon, using her for sabotage, assassination, and psychological warfare against Republic commanders. She answered to Dooku alone and functioned outside any formal Separatist military structure. She was not Sith, she was not Jedi. She was something the Order had no classification for. Ventress signaled something the Jedi had not fully processed. The Separatists were fielding dark-side Force users outside the Sith tradition. Ventress operated as Dooku's weapon, but she held no formal Sith title. The Jedi's intelligence framework assumed the rule of two, the ancient Sith doctrine that only a master and an apprentice could exist at any given time. Ventress broke that assumption. She can match a Jedi Knight in lightsaber combat, command battle droids in the field, and disappear before Republic forces could pin her down. And she was only the first. More dark-side operatives would follow. But the deepest threat to the Jedi Order lay beneath the temple itself. Yoda had admitted before the war that the dark side of the Force clouded the Jedi's ability to see the future, and Mace confirmed that their collective Force sensitivity had diminished. Most on the Council attributed this to the growing influence of the Sith somewhere in the galaxy, a vague explanation that satisfied no one and prompted no investigation. The real cause was far more specific and far closer to home. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant was built directly on top of an ancient Sith shrine. James Luceno described it in Tarkin as a rock-walled enclosure deep beneath the temple's foundations. The Jedi had built their seat over buried darkness, believing proximity would neutralize it. Instead, it normalized it. The shrine's dark side energy had been seeping upward through the structure for centuries, eroding Jedi perception slowly and invisibly. The corruption had been working against the Order for longer than anyone alive could measure. Every meditation, every council session, every attempt to reach into the Force and see clearly had been compromised by the very ground beneath them. The Jedi could not detect the Sith because the Sith had poisoned their home long before the war began. This was the institution now leading a galactic army, a council that treated internal challenge as treason. Knights promoted ahead of schedule and deployed without adequate preparation, a Supreme Chancellor who was the Sith Lord they could not sense, and a temple built on a foundation of dark side corruption that had been eroding Jedi perception for thousands of years. Every structural weakness the Sith needed to exploit was already in place. The war had not created these fractures, it had revealed them. And still, there were voices urging a different path. Duchess Satine Kryze of Mandalore organized the Council of Neutral Systems in 22 BBY. Over 1,500 star systems joined her coalition, formally refusing to fight for either the Republic or the Confederacy. Satine argued that both sides were escalating a conflict that diplomacy could resolve. In Brotherhood, Obi-Wan watched her formal declaration on the HoloNet from inside the Jedi Temple. A pacifist alternative existed. The Republic Senate dismissed it as naive. The Jedi Council treated it as irrelevant to the military reality they now faced. Obi-Wan, who shared a personal history with Satine, stretching back to his years as a Padawan, watched in silence. He did not argue or defend the Order. He simply watched. He could not endorse her position without undermining the institution he served. The Council of Neutral Systems represented the galaxy's largest organized rejection of the Clone Wars. It proved that not every system accepted the conflict as inevitable, but neutrality required protection, and the neutral systems had no military. Mandalore's pacifist government had dismantled its warrior traditions a generation earlier. Without the means to enforce their stance, Satine's coalition remained vulnerable to pressure from both sides. The Separatists viewed neutral worlds as future conquests. The Republic viewed them as obstacles to full mobilization. Hardliners in the Senate argued that neutrality in wartime was indistinguishable from support for the enemy. Satine's coalition would hold for a time, but the war would eventually reach Mandalore, and when it arrived, diplomacy alone would not stop it. The Jedi Order emerged from its first few weeks of war, changed in ways that could not be reversed. Knights had been promoted without trials, and the youngest members already sensed the weight of a role they had never trained for. A Jedi Master who questioned the war sat confined in the archives. The Order's most vulnerable knight had confessed his darkest act to the enemy rather than his own order. A dark side assassin now operated freely across the galaxy, and the temple itself sat on Sith corruption that none of them could detect. The Jedi had become generals. The war would now test whether they could lead. Christophsis would deliver that test, and the Republic was about to discover what the war's real pattern looked like on the ground. Chapter 3: War Template. Christophsis was the war's first real test, not because it was the largest battle or the most strategically important, but because it was the first campaign where everything went wrong at once. Blockade, betrayal, ground war, and political crisis collapsed on top of each other in a matter of days. The Republic survived it, but the pattern that emerged at Christophsis would repeat across every major campaign of Year 1, and the Republic would never learn from it. The planet was a crystalline world in the Outer Rim, rich in resources and positioned along key hyperspace lanes. The Separatists had occupied it early in the war and installed a full naval blockade under the command of Admiral Trench. Trench was a harsh and arachnid species from Secundus Ando, whose career of destroying Republic fleets stretched back decades before the Clone Wars began. His tactical record was nearly flawless. The blockade over Christophsis consisted of roughly 30 capital ships, including Lucrehulk-class battleships and Munificent-class star frigates. Supply convoys could not reach the surface, and the civilian population was under siege. Republic forces on the ground were running low on ammunition, medical supplies, and food. The Jedi Council sent Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker to break the blockade and relieve the surface garrison. Anakin commanded a stealth ship, an experimental prototype equipped with a cloaking device. The vessel was one of the Republic's most closely guarded military secrets. Anakin used it to slip past the Separatist sensor grid and deliver critical supplies directly to the besieged forces below. The Admiral detected the supply drops and attempted to track the cloaked ship by locking onto its magnetic signature, but Anakin turned the tactic against him. He allowed Trench's tracking torpedoes to acquire the stealth ship's signal, then redirected the vessel so the torpedoes followed their original trajectory back towards the source. The resulting explosion tore through Trench's command ship. Trench survived, though the Republic would not discover that until much later in the war. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 2 episode Cat and Mouse, the engagement proved that Separatist blockade tactics could be beaten with the right combination of Jedi improvisation and experimental technology. The victory also revealed a vulnerability in the Republic's approach. The stealth ship was a prototype. There was only one. The tactic that broke Trench's blockade could not be replicated at scale across every contested system in the Outer Rim. With the blockade disrupted, Republic reinforcements pushed to the surface. Obi-Wan and Anakin joined the ground campaign alongside Captain Rex and the 501st Legion. Rex had been assigned as Anakin's clone captain and second in command, and he was methodical, loyal, and capable of independent judgment under fire. The two formed an immediate working bond that would define the 501st's command structure for the rest of the war. Rex provided tactical discipline and a ground-level awareness of battlefield conditions. Anakin provided the aggression and unpredictability that kept Separatist commanders reacting rather than planning. Together with Commander Cody of the 212th Attack Battalion serving under Obi-Wan, the Republic established forward positions across the Crystal City and began pushing the Separatist droid garrison back block by block. But the real threat at Christophsis was not in front of them. It was inside their own ranks. Clone Sergeant Slick had been feeding intelligence to Asajj Ventress. Patrol schedules, troop positions, planned offensives, supply depot locations. Every move the Republic made on the surface of Christophsis, the Separatists already knew. Ambushes struck where they should not have been possible. Supply lines were cut before convoys could depart, and clone squads walked into kill zones that had been prepared hours in advance. The pattern of losses was too precise to be coincidence. Rex and Commander Cody began investigating the breach, cross-referencing patrol assignments against ambush locations, and checking which personnel had access to operational briefings. The process required them to treat their own brothers as suspects for the first time in the war. The investigation narrowed to Slick's platoon. When confronted, Slick admitted the betrayal openly, but he showed no remorse. Instead, he challenged the entire foundation of clone service. Slick accused the Jedi of treating clones as property rather than people. The clones had been engineered without consent, conditioned to obey, and deployed to fight a war that they had no voice in choosing. He argued that selling intelligence to the clone army was the only act of free will available to him. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 1 episode The Hidden Enemy, Slick's defiance raised a question that neither the Republic nor the Jedi had addressed since the Army's creation. No one had determined whether clones were soldiers with rights or products with programming. Rex arrested Slick, and the breach was sealed. The investigation ended, but the question Slick raised stayed in the air. It was not answered. The Republic needed its army functional, not debating its own status. No formal inquiry followed the incident. Clone rights and autonomy were never reviewed. The clones continued to serve under the same conditions, and the institution they served continued to classify them as military assets rather than citizens. The Republic buried the question. It would resurface. Outnumbered garrison, internal breach, tactical improvisation, strategic distraction, no decisive capture. The pattern was forming. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every major campaign of Year 1 would follow the structure. And in the middle of that war zone, a 14-year-old Padawan arrived with orders nobody had requested. Ahsoka Tano landed on Christophsis carrying a message from Yoda and an assignment that blindsided Anakin completely. She had been designated as his Padawan learner. Anakin had not asked for an apprentice, and he had not been consulted about the decision. The assignment came directly from Yoda, who believed that the responsibility of training a student would force the young knight to confront the attachment tendencies the Council had long observed in him. Teaching someone else to grow in the Force would require patience, selflessness, and the willingness to let go, the qualities the Council feared he lacked. Giving him a Padawan was a deliberate intervention. In practice, it meant Anakin received a teenager on an active battlefield and had to integrate her into combat operations immediately. A 14-year-old minor assigned to a combat command in an active war zone. The order that debated whether it should lead armies had just sent a child into one. Ahsoka was Togruta, brought to the Jedi Temple at age 3 after Plo Koon discovered her on Shiley, and determined to prove herself. She was also brash, argumentative, and inclined to improvise under pressure rather than follow established procedure. Her first interactions with Anakin were marked by friction. She challenged his orders, and he dismissed her lack of experience. Neither backed down easily, but the dynamic produced results. Ahsoka's presence forced Anakin to articulate tactical decisions rather than act on instinct alone. She asked the questions that seasoned officers had stopped asking. Over time, their relationship would evolve into one of the most consequential bonds of the entire war. The Christophsis ground campaign ended in a Republic victory as Separatist forces withdrew from the planet, but the Jedi Council had already issued new orders before the last droid column had retreated. Jabba the Hutt's son had been kidnapped, and the Republic needed the Hutts far more than it needed Christophsis. Rada, the infant son of Jabba the Hutt, had been taken from Tatooine and hidden on the jungle world of Teth. The kidnapping appeared to be a Separatist operation. Jabba controlled the Outer Rim hyperspace lanes that the Republic desperately needed for supply routes, fleet movements, and troop deployments to contested systems. Without Hutt cooperation, Republic logistics across the entire Outer Rim would collapse. Convoys would need to reroute through contested lanes, doubling transit times to every forward operating base beyond the core. Palpatine ordered the Jedi to recover Rada and return him to Jabba, securing the Alliance before the Separatists could. Anakin and Ahsoka were reassigned from Christophsis to Teth immediately. Rex and the 501st accompanied them. Their target was a monastery perched on top of a sheer cliff face deep in the jungle highlands. Separatist battle droids held the position in strength. The 501st had no alternative approach. They scaled the cliff under sustained fire, using ATTE walkers to climb the vertical rock face while LAAT gunships provided suppressive air support from above. The ascent was brutal. Droids fired down from the monastery walls and the surrounding cliff ledges, while gunships were hit by anti-aircraft fire and crashed into the jungle canopy below. Clone troopers were knocked from the cliff face by concentrating volleys. The 501st kept climbing. They reached the top. Anakin and Ahsoka fought through the monastery's interior corridors and located Rada, sick and weakened from deliberate neglect. The Separatists had kept the Huttlet alive, but in rapidly declining health. Ventress arrived shortly after with a fresh wave of battle droids, trapping the Republic force inside the same monastery they had just swarmed. What had been a rescue mission became a siege, with clone troopers now defending the walls against an enemy that outnumbered them and held the surrounding terrain. Rex organized the defense, positioning clone troopers at choke points throughout the monastery's corridors and stairwells. Obi-Wan arrived shortly after and engaged Ventress directly. She fought with her twin red lightsabers in the narrow corridors and across open balconies where the height of the cliff turned every misstep into a fatal drop. Ahsoka carried the sick Huttlet through a secondary escape route while the 501st held defensive positions throughout the structure. Clone casualties mounted inside the corridors. The monastery had not been built for sustained defense, and the droids held a decisive numerical advantage. The Republic force held long enough for Anakin and Ahsoka to break free with Rada, but the extraction cost the 501st heavily. Teth had demanded everything the unit had. The return journey carried its own complications. Count Dooku had engineered the entire kidnapping as a frame operation against the Jedi. Ventress had been deployed not simply to kill Anakin, but to ensure the Jedi were seen at the scene. Evidence had been planted to make it appear that the Jedi themselves had taken Rada, intending to use the Huttlet as leverage against Jabba. Dooku transmitted real holographic recordings of Anakin at the monastery to Jabba's palace, carefully edited and stripped of context to suggest hostage-taking rather than rescue. If Jabba believed the Jedi had kidnapped his son, the Hutt Alliance would collapse permanently and the Outer Rim lanes would close to Republic traffic. Padme Amidala intervened on Coruscant, contacting Jabba's uncle Zero the Hutt and exposing his role in the conspiracy. Zero had collaborated with Dooku to orchestrate the kidnapping from within the Hutt clan itself, hoping to seize control of the criminal empire. Anakin delivered Rada to Jabba's palace on Tatooine. The Hutt Treaty was secured. Republic supply lines through the Outer Rim remained open. As depicted in the Clone Wars theatrical film, the operation was the Republic's first major diplomatic victory of the war. It had been achieved not through Senate negotiation, but through a Jedi combat mission conducted under fire, across 2 planets, in less than a week. But every element of the Christophsis Teth campaign revealed the operational pattern that would define the rest of Year 1. A Separatist blockade choked a strategic world. The Republic broke through with Jedi improvisation and prototype technology. A ground campaign exposed internal vulnerabilities that the institution had no framework to address. Then, a second crisis pulled forces away before the first fight was fully resolved, and a political objective overtook the military one, forcing the Jedi to serve as diplomats, generals, and rescue operatives at the same time. The pattern was efficient because it was orchestrated. Palpatine needed the war to stretch across every front, consuming Jedi resources, exhausting clone manpower, and justifying the emergency powers he had already claimed. Every campaign that pulled the Republic in a new direction served that design. The Jedi could not refuse a single assignment because every assignment appeared urgent, necessary, and morally justified. Christophsis needed liberating. Rada needed rescuing. The Hutts needed securing. Each individual task was real, but the system generating them was controlled by the man who profited from every outcome. Anakin emerged from the campaign with a new Padawan, a tested captain, and a growing reputation as the Republic's most effective field commander. Ahsoka had survived her first real combat. Rex had demonstrated that clone officers could lead under fire and make independent decisions that saved lives. The bonds formed at Christophsis and Teth would carry the 501st through campaigns that grew steadily worse. Not all of them would survive what came next. The next front was already burning, and the war was about to demand something the Republic had not yet been asked to give: sacrifice with no strategic return. Chapter 4: Outer Rim Burns. The Outer Rim was collapsing, not through a single decisive campaign, but through neglect. While the Republic Senate debated funding timelines and logistical priorities on Coruscant, entire star systems were being overrun by Separatist forces. The droid armies did not wait for votes. They moved, occupied, and fortified. Worlds that had signed treaties with the Republic expecting protection discovered that the signature meant nothing without ships, soldiers, and political will, and all three were in short supply. Ryloth was among the first to burn. The Separatists invaded under the command of Wat Tambor, the foreman of the Techno-Union and one of the Confederacy's most calculating industrial leaders. Tambor treated the occupation as an extraction operation. Twi'lek villages were ransacked and civilians were displaced into the canyons and highland passes. The Separatist blockade above the planet cut off all incoming aid, and the droid garrison on the surface outnumbered the logical defense forces by a factor the Twi'leks could not overcome alone. Resistance fighters under Sham Syndulla organized a guerrilla campaign against the droid patrols, striking supply convoys and pulling back into terrain the droids could not navigate efficiently. Syndulla's fighters knew the cave networks and mountain passes that the droid patrols could not map from orbit. They used that knowledge to ambush armor columns in narrow defiles and vanish before reinforcements arrived. But every engagement cost Syndulla fighters he could not replace, and the droids kept coming in numbers that did not diminish. The Twi'leks were losing ground by the day. The Republic had been asked to intervene, but the Senate had not yet approved it. Jedi General Ima Gun-Di and Clone Captain Keeley were the only Republic forces on the ground. They had not been sent to win, they'd been sent to hold. The column of Twi'lek refugees stretched for over a kilometer through a narrow canyon pass. Families carried what they could, and the elderly moved on foot alongside children too young to understand why they were running. Sham Syndulla's fighters walked the perimeter of the column, armed with whatever they had managed to salvage from abandoned villages and dead droids. Medical supplies had run out days earlier, and water was rationed. The canyon offered cover from aerial bombardment, but it also funneled the refugees into a corridor the Separatists could target from both ends. Dee's detachment of clone troopers held the rear of the column while Syndulla guided the front deeper into the highlands. The Separatist advance was relentless. Droid battalions pushed forward in waves, supported by armored tanks that shelled the canyon walls and collapsed sections of the escape route behind the fleeing civilians. Dee's clones held the line at the mouth of the canyon, trading ground for time. Ammunition depleted first, then medical supplies, then grenades. The clones stripped blaster packs from the fallen and redistributed them among the survivors. There was no resupply coming, and no reinforcements had been dispatched. Dee knew the math. His force was not large enough to hold the canyon indefinitely, and the refugees had not yet reached safety. Every minute his troopers held their position was a minute the civilians could use to escape. He ordered the remaining clones to form a final defensive line across the canyon floor. Captain Keeley stood beside him, and neither retreated. The droids advanced into concentrated fire. Clones fell. Dee deflected blaster bolts with his green lightsaber, buying seconds with each swing. Keeley fired until his blaster overheated, then picked up another from a dead trooper and kept shooting. The droid tanks rolled closer. Dee cut through the first wave of infantry and force-pushed the second into the canyon wall. But the third wave closed the distance before he could recover. Keeley dropped to one knee, took a bolt through the shoulder, and kept firing with his offhand. Dee stepped in front of him and took 3 bolts across the chest plate, but he stayed upright long enough to bring his lightsaber through the nearest droid. The two of them held that line together until neither could stand. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 3 episode Supply Lines, the last stand of Ima Gun-Di and Captain Keeley ended the only way it could. Both died on the canyon floor. Their bodies lay among their troopers in the dust of Ryloth. 3 Pelta-class frigates arrived from the orbit as D fell, carrying the supplies Syndulla's resistance had been requesting for weeks. The Senate authorization came after the soldiers were already dead. The aid reached Ryloth because of the time D and Keeley purchased with their lives, not because of any Senate resolution. The supplies that saved Ryloth's refugees had not come from Coruscant. They had come from Toydaria. Senator Bail Organa and Representative Jar Jar Binks had traveled to Toydaria to negotiate the use of the planet as a staging point for humanitarian relief. Toydaria was neutral. Its king, Katunko, had not committed to either side in the war. The Republic needed him to allow supply ships to launch from Toydarian space towards Ryloth without declaring that assistance an act of war against the Confederacy. The stakes extended far beyond a single planet. If Toydaria agreed, it would establish the first neutral supply corridor in the Outer Rim. If it refused, Ryloth would fall within weeks. Every world between Coruscant and Ryloth was either contested, blockaded, or already aligned with the Confederacy. Trade Federation Senator Lot Dodd arrived on Toydaria to ensure the deal collapsed, arguing that any Republic military use of Toydarian territory would violate the planet's neutrality and invite Separatist retaliation. He presented trade data showing the volume of commerce Toydaria conducted with the Confederacy-aligned systems and warned that all of it would be suspended the moment the Republic warships launch from Toydarian soil. The argument combined legal precedent with economic pressure. Katunko would lose both his neutrality and his trade revenue in a single decision. But the argument was also designed to let Ryloth's civilian population starve while the bureaucracy sorted out authority. Katunko faced the calculation every natural leader in the Outer Rim would eventually confront: honor the treaty that kept his word safe, or help the people dying on the world next door. Katunko chose both. He publicly denied the Republic basing rights, siding with Dodd's legal argument in the formal session. Then he secretly loaded Organa's ship with relief supplies. When Dodd later protested that aid had reached Ryloth through Toydarian channels, Organa demanded proof. Dodd could not produce it. As depicted in supply lines, Toydaria's covert assistance kept Syndulla's resistance alive, but Katunko had taken an enormous risk for a single shipment. If the Republic wanted sustained access to the Outer Rim supply corridor, it needed Toydaria as a formal ally, not a secret one. A covert cargo hold could be denied. A signed treaty could not. For that, the Jedi sent their most senior member. Yoda traveled to the coral moon of Rugosa to negotiate the alliance in person. He brought 3 clones. The Separatists brought an army. Asajj Ventress had intercepted the Republic's diplomatic transmission and arrived on Rugosa ahead of Yoda's delegation. She contacted Katunko directly with a counteroffer. If the droid battalion she had deployed to the moon's surface could defeat the Jedi, Toydaria would join the Confederacy. If Yoda survived, the Republic would earn its alliance. Katunko agreed to the challenge. Yoda's escort consisted of 3 clone troopers, Lieutenant Thayer, Jek, and Reese. Their LAAT gunship had been shot down during the approach, scattering debris across the coral shelf and forcing the group to advance on foot through Rugosa's dense coral forests toward Katunko's position. They were outnumbered, cut off from air support, and operating on a moon none of them had ever set foot on. The droid assault came in force. Battle droids and armored assault tanks advanced together through the coral tree line, though the dense terrain stalled the tanks while the infantry pushed ahead. Yoda dismantled the first wave of droids with a speed that made their targeting systems irrelevant. He moved through the trees faster than their sensors could track, appearing behind columns before the lead units had finished scanning forward. The tanks broke through the tree line and opened fire, their cannons leveling entire groves as they pushed forward. The ground shook with each blast. Coral spires that had stood for centuries shattered into dust under the bombardment. Thayer ordered Jack and Reese to relocate before the next volley hit, and they moved just before the ridge they had occupied moments earlier exploded into fragments. Ventress escalated further. Droidekas rolled into the forest as reinforcements, their shield generators humming as they locked onto Yoda's last known position. He was already gone. The droidekas fired into empty coral formations, while Yoda circled behind and collapsed them with the Force. Yoda used every opening the clones created. Infantry columns advanced into kill zones where the smallest Jedi in the Order waited with his green blade and 8 centuries of combat experience. The tanks burned. The droids scattered. Ventress watched her entire battalion disintegrate from a command post she'd expected to use for a victory address. The moment that defined the mission came during a pause between engagements, when Yoda asked his 3 clones to remove their helmets. He studied each face. Thayer's patience under fire was acknowledged first, then Reese for his heart, then Jek for his ingenuity. Yoda told them that they were clones, but the Force resided in all living things. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 1 premiere ambush, Yoda treated clone individuality not as a logistical detail, but as a spiritual truth. He did not call them soldiers or units, he called them living beings connected to the Force. It was a small statement on a smaller moon, but for 3 clones standing in a coral forest, it was the first time their commanding officer had told them they mattered as individuals. The Republic had classified its army as military assets since Kamino. Yoda's words on Ragoza contradicted that. These words would not protect them later. Ventress lost the challenge. She attempted to assassinate Katunko directly when the contest turned against her, confirming every concern the Toydarian king had about Separatist honesty. Katunko declared that no further negotiations were necessary. He rose from his seat, presented Yoda with a ceremonial sword, a Toydarian blade traditionally offered only to heads of state and wartime allies, and pledged Toydaria to the Republic. The alliance included permission to establish a Republic supply base on Toydarian territory and full access to the system's hyperspace routes for military convoys. The covert pipeline that had saved Ryloth's refugees became an official logistics corridor. For the first time since Geonosis, the Republic had a secured supply chain into the Outer Rim that did not depend on contested hyperspace lanes. The decision cost Katunko his life. Later in the war, Count Dooku dispatched Savage Opress to Toydaria to capture the king alive. Opress disobeyed. He killed Katunko in his own throne room by crushing his throat. The Toydarian alliance survived its king, but the message was clear. Neutrality ended the moment he chose a side. Every neutral leader who sided with the Republic would be marked. The Outer Rim had been secured through blood and backroom diplomacy, but a new weapon was about to make those victories irrelevant. The Outer Rim learned the essential truth of Year One. The Republic's promises were only as strong as the individual soldiers willing to die for them. Its supply lines were now open, and its alliances were now signed, and a Separatist warship the size of nothing the Republic had ever encountered was already hunting fleets in the dark. Chapter 5: Fleet Killer. Republic fleets had been disappearing. In the weeks following the first Outer Rim campaigns, entire patrol groups vanished without explanation. No distress signals reached Coruscant, no debris fields were found, and no escape pods were recovered. The ships simply stopped reporting, and the Republic had no intelligence on what was destroying them. Across dozens of systems, the same pattern repeated. A fleet entered a sector, transmitted routine status updates, and then went silent. Search parties dispatched to the last known coordinates found empty space. The task force that vanished near the Fu system had been carrying supplies to a forward operating base, and the patrol group lost in the Rendelia system had been escorting medical transports. Each disappearance carried operational consequences the Republic could not absorb. The Navy began rerouting convoys through longer hyperspace lanes to avoid the sectors where ships had gone dark, stretching supply timelines that were already strained. The disappearances generated fear across the fleet and confusion inside the Jedi Council. Something was hunting Republic warships, and it was doing so without leaving a single survivor to describe what had happened. The Jedi Council sent Master Plo Koon to investigate. Plo Koon commanded a small task force of 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers and deployed to the Abrogado system, where the most recent patrol group had gone dark. He found the answer. The Malevolence was waiting for him. The Separatists had built a warship the Republic had no answer for. It measured 4,845 meters long, more than 4 times the length of a Venator-class Star Destroyer, and it carried 2 mega-ion cannons capable of disabling an entire fleet in a single volley. The Malevolence was a Subjugator-class heavy cruiser under the direct command of General Grievous, and supplementary canon reference material described the vessel as carrying hundreds of turbo lasers and requiring a massive droid crew to operate. The mega-ion cannons were not conventional weapons. They fired a circular ion pulse that expanded outward from the ship in a massive wave, shorting out every electrical system it touched. Shields, engines, life support, communications, weapons, everything died at once. A fleet hit by the ion pulse became a collection of powerless hulls drifting in space, unable to fight, unable to run, and unable to call for help. Plo Koon's task force never had a chance. The Malevolence fired its ion cannons the moment the Republic ships entered range. All 3 Venators lost power simultaneously. Grievous then ordered his turbolaser batteries to open fire on the defenseless fleet. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 1 episode Rising Malevolence, the destruction was systematic. The Venators burned in silence. Their crews drifted through darkened corridors as the hull plating buckled around them, and clones who reached the escape pods launched into the debris field, hoping to drift clear of the wreckage until rescue arrived. Rescue was not coming. Grievous deployed Drock-class boarding craft loaded with rocket battle droids. These pod hunters moved through the debris field, scanning for active escape pods and destroying them one by one. This was not warfare, it was erasure. The clones who had survived the initial bombardment watched the hunters approach on failing scanners, knowing that the pods had no weapons and no way to run. The pod hunters were methodical. They swept the debris field in grid patterns, starting from the outer ring of wreckage and working inward. Each destroyed pod flashed briefly against the dark. Some clones tried to power their pods down to avoid detection. Most were found anyway. The hunter's sensors could detect residual heat from a single functioning life support unit. By the time the sweep reached the inner debris ring, the number of surviving pods had dropped to single digits. Dooku had ordered that no survivors escape Abrogado. No witnesses, no intelligence, no mercy. That was the operational doctrine for the Malevolence. Every fleet it destroyed was meant to vanish completely. Plo Koon survived. He and a handful of clones, including Commander Wolf, Sergeant Sinker, and Boost, had sealed themselves inside a damaged pod and powered down all systems to avoid detection. The pod hunters swept past them. The oxygen gauge dropped steadily. Sinker calculated how long the remaining supply would last and kept the number to himself, while Boost sealed a crack in the pod's viewport with a torn section of his bodysuit. Plo Koon held the small group together through hours of drifting in the wreckage of his fleet, using the Force to slow their breathing and conserve what air remained. He told them they would be found. He did not tell them how. The 2 hours passed. The wreckage around them shifted as nearby planetary gravity slowly pulled the debris field into a decaying orbit. Plo Koon held his hand on the pod's interior wall, feeling through the Force for vibrations that might signal another pod hunter's approach. None came. The hunters had moved on to the next sector, their sweep pattern carrying them further from the inner ring, where Koon's pod drifted in silence. The rescue came from a source the Jedi Council had not authorized. Ahsoka Tano convinced Anakin to disobey direct orders and mount a search mission for Plo Koon. The Council and Chancellor Palpatine had both instructed Anakin to hold position and protect his current sector. Reinforcements were not approved. A rescue mission into a system where an unknown weapon had just destroyed 3 Star Destroyers was considered an unacceptable risk. Ahsoka pushed back. Plo Koon was the Jedi who had discovered her on Shiley when she was 3 years old and brought her to the temple. She would not abandon him. Anakin agreed. They took the Twilight into the Abrogado system, located Plo Koon's pod in the debris field, and recovered the survivors while evading the pod hunters still sweeping the area. For the first time, the Republic had living witnesses who could describe the weapon that had been annihilating its fleets. The survivors described the ion pulse, its circular expansion pattern, and the total system failure it caused. They confirmed the Malevolence's size and armament. Republic Naval Intelligence now had a target profile, a weapon signature, and a confirmed commander. The intelligence Ahsoka's disobedience produced was the only reason the Republic learned what the Malevolence was before it destroyed everything in its path. The Malevolence's next target was not a military fleet, it was a hospital. Grievous set course for the Khalida Nebula, where a Republic medical station orbited in what the Navy considered safe space. The Khalida Shoals Medical Center housed 60,000 wounded clone troopers recovering from injuries sustained across the first months of the war. The station's medical staff operated around the clock. Bacta-tanks lined every ward. Clones who had lost limbs on Christophsis lay beside troopers burned in the Ryloth campaign, and soldiers recovering from shrapnel wounds sustained in a dozen different engagements. The station had minimal defensive capability, with only a single frigate and a handful of starfighters standing between the medical center and open space. The station's commanding officer had begun emergency evacuation protocols the moment long-range sensors detected an unidentified capital ship on approach. But evacuation required transport ships, and the station had only 2 medical shuttles capable of carrying patients. At full capacity, those shuttles could move fewer than 200 clones per trip. Moving 60,000 would take weeks. The station had hours. If the Malevolence reached it, the ion pulse would disable the station's life support systems, and 60,000 clones would die in their beds without ever seeing the weapon that killed them. Anakin intercepted intelligence on the Malevolence's heading and launched a strike before the main fleet can mobilize. He led a squadron of BTLB Y-wing bombers through the Khalida Nebula itself, using the nebula's dense gas clouds as cover to avoid the Malevolence's long-range sensors. The direct route would have brought the bombers within firing range of the warship's turbolasers before they could line up an attack run. The nebula path was longer and far more dangerous, but it would put the squadron behind the Malevolence where its ion cannons cannot track them. The route nearly killed them before the Malevolence could. Giant Nebrae mantas inhabited the nebula and attacked the squadron during transit, forcing the Y-wings to navigate both the creatures and the gas pockets that disrupted their instruments. 2 bombers were destroyed by the mantas. A third lost its stabilizer in a gas pocket and spiraled into a dense cloud formation. The remaining bombers cleared the nebula and emerged within strike range. As depicted in Shadow of Malevolence, Anakin's squadron targeted the ship's port mega ion cannon. Grievous had positioned droid starfighters in a defensive screen around the cannon, and the Y-wings had to punch through the screen before they could begin their bombing approach. 2 more bombers were destroyed in the final seconds of the run. The surviving Y-wings dropped their payloads along the cannon's exposed superstructure. The weapon detonated. The medical station survived. But the Malevolence still had 1 functioning ion cannon, and Grievous withdrew to repair rather than press an attack with half his primary weapon offline. The warship was wounded. It was not dead. Palpatine made certain that the Republic's next encounter with the Malevolence would cost something personal. Senator Padme Amidala received coordinates from the Chancellor's office, directing her to a diplomatic meeting with an intergalactic banking clan representative. The meeting location placed her ship directly in the Malevolence's operational zone. Dooku confirmed the arrangement from the Separatist side. He told Grievous that his master had personally arranged for the Senator's arrival. Palpatine endangered the woman Anakin loved, and the Republic would never suspect him of it. The Senator's yacht dropped out of hyperspace and was immediately caught in the Malevolence's tractor beam. Grievous now held a hostage, and the hostage was the secret wife of the Republic's most aggressive Jedi general. Anakin's attack fleet had been closing on the damaged Malevolence for a killing strike. The moment Padme's capture was confirmed, Anakin ordered the fleet to hold fire. He could not risk a full bombardment while she was aboard. Obi-Wan recognized the tactical problem immediately. The Malevolence was crippled, outnumbered, and cornered. A sustained assault would have destroyed it. Instead, the Republic fleet held position while Anakin and Obi-Wan boarded the warship personally. Every minute the fleet waited was a minute Grievous used to attempt emergency repairs on the damaged ion cannon. The interior of the Malevolence was a warship built for droids, not organic crews. The corridors were narrow, poorly lit, and patrolled by battle droid squads that Grievous had repositioned to intercept boarders. Anakin and Obi-Wan fought through multiple security checkpoints, cutting down droids as they moved deeper into the ship. The ship's internal layout worked against them. Intersections branched into dead-end maintenance bays and droid storage compartments. Anakin used the Force to sense Padme's presence and navigated toward her through corridors that the ship's own crew would have traveled by rail transport, not on foot. They found Padme, and while Obi-Wan held a corridor junction against reinforcements, Anakin reached the ship's navigation computer and reprogrammed its hyperspace coordinates. The sabotage was precise. The computer would accept Grievous's next jump command and execute it without error. The destination would simply be wrong. When Grievous attempted to flee into hyperspace, the corrupted coordinates sent the Malevolence directly into a dead moon. As depicted in Destroy Malevolence, the warship's forward section struck the moon's surface at full hyperspace entry speed. The impact sheared the hull apart. The remaining ion cannon, the turbo laser batteries, the bridge, everything collapsed into a debris field that spread across the moon's orbit. Grievous escaped in his personal starfighter moments before the collision. The Republic fleet moved in to confirm the kill. Venator-class Star Destroyers swept the debris field for 2 standard days, cataloging wreckage and scanning for any surviving systems. Nothing functional remained. The mega ion cannons that had terrorized the Republic fleet for weeks were buried under a kilometer of shattered hull plating on the surface of a dead moon. The Republic's superweapon crisis was over. The Republic celebrated the Malevolence's destruction, but the evidence of what had actually happened during the campaign sat in plain sight, and nobody examined it. Padme's presence in the combat zone had been arranged by Palpatine's office. Dooku had confirmed that his master orchestrated the Senator's arrival. 2 separate chains of command, one Republic and one Separatist, had placed the same woman in the same location at the same time. The evidence was visible. No one wanted to see it. No Senate investigation followed. No inquiry examined how the Chancellor's diplomatic briefing had sent a senator into an active war zone where a Separatist general was expecting her. Nobody pursued it. The Separatists could build weapons that outclass anything in the Republic fleet, and they could do so in secret. The system that had produced the Malevolence was still intact. The general who commanded it was still alive, and the man who sat in the Chancellor's suite on Coruscant had orchestrated both the threat and the response. The first superweapon of the Clone Wars had been eliminated, but Grievous had survived, and his next target would be the source of the Republic's entire army. Chapter 6: Born Soldiers. The Malevolence was gone, but Grievous had survived its destruction, and the target he chose next revealed exactly how well the Separatists understood the Republic's greatest vulnerability. The Republic's entire military depended on a single planet. Every clone trooper in the army had been grown, trained, and deployed from the same facility on Kamino. And if that facility fell, the Republic could not replace its losses. The war would not end through victory or surrender, but through simple attrition. The clones would fight until there were none left, and no new soldiers would come to take their place. Grievous knew this, and the listening post that stood between his fleet and Kamino was staffed by 5 rookies who had never seen combat. But before Rishi Station, there was Kamino, and before the war, there was training. The cloning facility on Kamino produced soldiers in batches. Each batch moved through the same standardized training pipeline. Combat simulations designed to measure teamwork, adaptability, and obedience. The Kaminoans organized cadets into squads of 4 to 6, graded them on a fixed evaluation schedule, and certified passing squads for deployment. Squads that failed were reassigned to maintenance duty. The Kaminoans graded cohesion. They did not grade courage. The system was efficient. It was also designed to produce uniformity, not individuals. Tipoca City was the center of this process. The Kaminoan capital rose from the ocean surface on massive stilts, its wide corridors and curved architecture designed for a species that valued precision above all else. Clone cadets never saw sunlight during training, moving between barracks, mess halls, and simulation rooms through windowless corridors that all looked the same. The training regimen filled every hour. Physical conditioning, weapons drills, tactical exercises, and medical evaluations ran on a rotating schedule that left cadets no unstructured time. The Kaminoans believed idle clones developed unwanted behavioral variation, and the schedule was designed to prevent exactly that. Domino Squad failed the system. 5 cadets trained together on Kamino, and the Kaminoans wanted them gone. The squad consisted of 5 clones: Heavy, Echo, Fives, Cut Up, and Droid Bait. Each had developed traits the Kaminoan instructors considered problems. Heavy was aggressive and insubordinate, treating squad exercises as opportunities to prove himself rather than as team operations. Echo repeated regulations and training protocols so often that his squad mates named him for it, while Fives questioned orders and challenged tactical decisions he considered flawed. Cut Up treated training scenarios as entertainment and struggled to take simulations seriously. Droid Bait moved too slow under fire and was consistently the first member eliminated in combat drills. Individually, each trait would have been manageable. Together, they produced a squad that could not function as a unit. The Citadel Challenge was the final evaluation. The multi-story assault course replicated a fortified Separatist installation with automated turrets firing stun rounds at randomized intervals. Squads were graded on coordination, casualty rate, and completion time. The course was designed to be passed. Every other squad in Domino's training cycle had cleared it on their first or second attempt. Domino Squad failed the Citadel Challenge on their first attempt and failed it again on their second. Heavy charged ahead without waiting for covering fire. Echo called out maneuvers that nobody followed, and Fives broke formation to engage turrets from angles the squad had not agreed on. Cut Up and Droid Bait were eliminated early in both runs. The squad argued after each failure. Heavy blamed the others for not keeping up. Fives blamed Heavy for not following the plan, and Echo insisted the plan itself was correct and that the squad simply needed to execute it properly. Cut Up stopped talking to any of them. Their performance was the worst in the training cycle. The tension inside Domino Squad's barracks was worse than the failures on the course. Heavy sat apart from the group, and when Fives tried to organize a debrief, Heavy told him there was nothing to discuss. Echo reviewed the training manual for the 3rd time, while Droid Bait cleaned his training rifle in silence. The squad had been together for their entire accelerated lives, grown up in the same pod, and trained in the same simulation rooms since they were old enough to hold a weapon. But shared history did not mean shared trust. The Citadel Challenge had exposed a fracture that had been building for months. Each member of Domino Squad had developed his own way of solving problems. None of them had learned how to solve problems together. Clone training instructor Brick recommended reassignment. Reassignment would remove them from the combat pipeline permanently. They would spend the war mopping floors and restocking supply crates in the lower levels of Tipoca City, and they would never see a battlefield. Brick considered this an appropriate outcome for a squad that could not pass a standard evaluation. Jedi General Shaak Ti overruled him. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 3 episode Clone Cadets, Shaak Ti had been assigned to oversee clone training on Kamino and had observed Domino Squad's failures firsthand. She saw what Brick did not. The squad's problems were not deficiencies, they were misaligned strengths. Heavy's aggression could become initiative. Echo's adherence to protocol could stabilize a unit under pressure, and Fives' questioning could become tactical thinking. The cadets did not need to be replaced. They needed a reason to work together. Shaak Ti granted Domino Squad one final attempt at the Citadel Challenge. Before that attempt, Brick sabotaged the run. He removed the ascension cables that had been standard issue in every previous evaluation, the equipment that allowed squads to bypass the most difficult vertical section of the course. When the other instructor, Elez, protested, Shaak Ti allowed the handicap to stand. Adversity in war was a constant. Without the cables, Domino Squad would have to improvise. they would have to trust each other. Heavy held position at the base of the vertical section and provided suppressive fire, while Echo directed traffic. Fives identified an alternate route through a vent shaft and called the squad through. Cut Up moved faster than he had in any previous drill, and Droid Bait covered the rear. They reached the extraction point as a unit. They passed. All 5 were certified for deployment. They received their armor, their weapons, and their assignment. The Republic shipped them to the Rishi Moon Listening Post, a remote outpost in the Outer Rim that monitored the only hyperspace approach to Kamino. It was considered a quiet posting, the kind of assignment the Republic gave to untested troopers who needed to learn how a real garrison operated before rotation into a combat unit. The veterans called them shinies because their armor had never been marked by combat. Domino Squad arrived at Rishi Station with clean white plates and no experience outside a simulation room. The transfer from Kamino had been their first time off-world. None of them said much during the journey. Heavy stared at the bulkhead while Echo read the Rishi Station operational manual that had been loaded onto his datapad. Fives watched the stars, Cut Up made a joke about the food, and Droid Bait fell asleep. 5 soldiers of the Grand Army of the Republic, and none of them had seen the galaxy they were supposed to be fighting for. Rishi Station was small. The outpost consisted of a command center, a barracks module, a communications array, and a landing platform built into the surface of the Rishi Moon. The garrison numbered fewer than a dozen troopers, all of them recent graduates from Kamino's training program, and the daily routine was monotonous. The garrison's only task was transmitting the all-clear signal to the Republic fleet at regular intervals. As long as it broadcast, the fleet knew the approach to Kamino was secure. If the signal stopped, the fleet would mobilize to investigate. The posting was boring, isolated, and considered by every clone who served there to be a temporary stop on the way to a real assignment. The war found them anyway. The Separatists hit Rishi Station with commando droids, no warning, no negotiation. The attack came in the middle of a routine shift, and 2 members of Domino Squad were dead before the survivors understood what was happening. Grievous needed the all-clear signal to keep broadcasting while his invasion force moved into position. He could not take Kamino if the Republic knew he was coming. The commando droids were sent to capture the station, eliminate its crew, and maintain the signal as if nothing had changed. Commando droids were not standard battle droids. They were faster, more accurate, and capable of operating independently without central command coordination. The droids infiltrated the station through the ventilation system and struck during a shift change when the garrison's attention was divided. The attack was over in seconds. Droid Bait was killed in the opening assault, taking a blaster bolt before he could reach his weapon. The station sergeant was killed moments later. 2 other troopers fell in the command center before anyone returned fire. The commando droids secured the room and activated a jamming signal that blocked all outgoing transmissions except the all-clear beacon. As far as the Republic fleet knew, Rishi Station was operating normally. The surviving clones evacuated through a maintenance hatch and regrouped on the moon's surface. Heavy, Echo, Fives, and Cut Up were now outside the station with no communications, no transport, and no reinforcements. The moon's surface was barren volcanic rock, swept by sulfuric vents that hissed steam into the thin atmosphere. Visibility dropped to a few meters near the vent clusters. All that remained was their armor, their blasters, and each other. Cut Up was killed minutes later. A Rishi eel, one of the massive predators native to the moon, emerged from a vent shaft and dragged him into the dark before the others could react. 3 members of Domino Squad remained. They had been deployed for less than a standard rotation, and they had already lost 2 of their own. The 3 survivors crouched behind a rock formation 50 meters from the station's rear wall. Heavy wanted to go back inside immediately. Fives held him back. Without knowing how many commando droids were inside, a direct assault with 3 rookies would be suicide. Echo ran through every tactical scenario from the training manual that applied to a fortified position assault. None of them matched what was happening. The manual had not covered a situation in which the enemy was already transmitting a signal designed to lure an invasion fleet through the front door. Rex and Cody arrived at Rishi Station shortly after the attack. The two senior officers had been conducting a routine inspection of the listening posts as part of a standard review of Outer Rim garrison readiness. When their shuttle approached, the commando droids attempted to deceive them by wearing clone trooper armor and mimicking the garrison's communication protocols. Rex was not fooled. He shot the commando droid that met them at the landing platform the moment it failed to give the correct response codes. The deception collapsed. Rex and Cody now understood that the station had been compromised. Rex and Cody linked up with the three surviving rookies on the moon's surface. Rex assessed them quickly, terrified, undertrained, and grieving, but also the only Republic soldiers between Grievous's fleet and the Camino cloning facility. Rex did not give them time to process what had happened. He checked their weapons, redistributed their ammunition, and organized them into a strike team. Cody mapped the station's layout from memory and identified two viable entry points. Rex would lead the main breach through the front entrance. The rookies would flank through a side maintenance corridor and hit the command center from the east. The plan was simple because it had to be. 5 soldiers, no heavy weapons, and no backup. The assault to retake Rishi Station was the first real combat Heavy, Echo, and Fives had ever experienced. The commando droids had fortified the command center and positioned sentries at every point. Rex and Cody breached the main entrance with a thermal detonator that blew the blast door off its tracks. The rookies hit the side corridor at the same time. The fighting inside was close quarters and chaotic. Blaster fire filled the narrow hallways. Commando droids moved faster than the standard models the rookies had trained against on Camino. Echo followed Rex's movements and provided covering fire exactly when it was needed. Fives cleared rooms with a precision that his Camino instructors had never seen in training. Heavy destroyed 3 commando droids in the first 30 seconds of the breach, moving with the aggression that had once been his greatest liability and was now his greatest asset. The station was retaken, but the victory lasted only seconds. The commando droids had already transmitted the all-clear signal. Grievous's fleet was in motion. The only way to alert the Republic was to destroy the station itself. Without the all-clear beacon, the fleet would detect the signal's absence and mobilize to investigate. Rex ordered the station rigged with explosives from its own armory. The charges were set around the fuel tanks in the station's lower level. The detonator was wired. The remote detonator malfunctioned. Heavy stayed behind. Someone had to trigger the explosives manually, and there was no time to argue about who. As depicted in the Clone Wars Season 1 episode Rookies, Heavy ordered the others to evacuate and took position next to the fuel tanks. Echo and Fives ran. Rex and Cody ran. Rex, Cody, Echo, and Fives cleared the station and sprinted for the landing platform. Behind them, Heavy waited. The commando droids detected the explosive charges and breached the lower level to disarm them. Heavy engaged them alone. He fired from behind the fuel tanks, drawing the droids into the kill zone he had created around the detonator. The commando droids advanced on his position from 3 directions. Heavy fired until his blaster was empty, and then picked up a fallen droid's weapon and fired that one dry too. The corridor went quiet. Static hissed through the helmet comms. Heavy's breathing was the only sound inside his visor. He looked at the detonator, then he reached for it. The explosion destroyed Rishi Station completely. The fireball rose above the moon's surface and was visible from orbit. The all-clear signal went dead. The Republic fleet detected the absence within minutes and scrambled a response force to the Rishi moon. Grievous's invasion fleet, now exposed without the cover of the false signal, was forced to withdraw before reaching Camino. The cloning facility survived because one clone trooper refused to leave a detonator behind. Heavy died on the floor of a listing post on a moon that most Republic officers could not find on a star chart. He had been a soldier for less than a standard rotation. His armor was still clean when the explosion turned it to slag. He never received a rank above trooper. No medal was issued. No one on Coruscant would ever record his name in a Senate mission. The Republic's official records logged the destruction of Rishi Station as an infrastructure loss. Heavy's name did not appear in the report. Rex processed the aftermath differently. He recovered what remained of Heavy's gear and returned to the Resolute with the surviving members of the Rishi garrison. On the flight back, he sat with Echo and Fives. He looked at their unmarked armor and made a decision. Rex took a stylus from his belt kit and left a blue handprint on Echo's chestplate, pressed in Rishi eelblood. The mark was not regulation and not authorized by the Republic chain of command. It was Rex's way of telling them that they were no longer shinies. They had earned their scars. They were soldiers of the 501st Legion. Echo and Fives accepted their marks in silence. They had left Kamino as part of a 5-man squad. 2 of their brothers were dead, and one had sacrificed himself to save a planet he had never set foot on. They had survived because a Jedi on Kamino had refused to discard them, and a captain in the 501st had arrived in time to lead them through the worst day of their lives. Yoda had called clones individuals on Ragoza. Rishi Station proved it. The traits Kamino had tried to train out of Domino Squad were the same traits that had saved the station. The system built them to be uniform. Combat made them irreplaceable. 5 clones had entered the war together. 3 died within their first deployment. The 2 who survived would go on to become 2 of the most important soldiers in the 501st Legion. Echo would later be captured, believed dead, and rebuilt as a cyborg by the Separatists before being rescued. Fives would uncover the truth about the clone army's hidden programming and die trying to expose it. But those events lay ahead. For now, they were rookies who had survived Rishi Station, carrying marks on their armor that no regulation authorized and names that no Kaminoan had given them. The Republic's army had proved that it could fight, adapt, and sacrifice. But the war was about to test whether the Republic could protect the intelligence that kept its soldiers alive. And that test had already begun. Chapter 7: War of Secrets. The Republic had proven it could fight. It had defeated a superweapon in the Malevolence campaign, secured its supply lines through the Hutt Treaty, and held its Outer Rim alliances through individual sacrifice. And its clones had demonstrated, from Kamino to Rishi Station, that they were far more than the product of their training. But the war's next phase would test something the Republic had never been forced to defend: its own intelligence. R2-D2 carried every Republic fleet position, tactical protocol, and base location stored in his memory banks. Anakin Skywalker had never wiped them. When the droid was lost in combat over Bothui, the entire Republic military network became vulnerable to a single Separatist recovery crew. General Grievous had not been idle since the destruction of the Malevolence. The cyborg general had regrouped his forces and launched an offensive into the Bothan sector, targeting Bothui, a world of significant strategic value in the Mid-Rim. The Republic dispatched Anakin and the 501st to hold the system. Anakin was outnumbered. Grievous brought a fleet of frigates and support vessels that outgunned the Republic task force in raw firepower, and a direct engagement would have ended the same way most engagements with Grievous ended, with Republic ships burning in space. Anakin did not fight directly. He studied the terrain. Bothui sat inside a planetary ring of defense asteroids, and Anakin recognized an opportunity that Grievous would not anticipate. He deployed ATTE walkers onto the surface of several large asteroids in the ring, positioning them on the far side where Grievous's sensors would not detect them. The walkers powered down and waited. Rex coordinated the positioning from the surface of the lead asteroid, keeping his men silent and still, while Grievous's fleet closed on the Republic position. Grievous committed. He drove his fleet forward with full power directed to his forward shields, expecting to overwhelm Anakin's smaller force through brute strength. As depicted in the Season 1 episode, Downfall of the Droid, the moment Grievous passed the asteroid ring, Rex's walkers opened fire from behind. The Separatist frigates had concentrated their deflector shields forward. Their sterns were exposed. The ATTE cannons tore through the unshielded rear sections of multiple frigates in rapid succession. Grievous's fleet, caught between Anakin's ships ahead and Rex's walkers behind, broke formation, and the frigates that survived the crossfire scattered. Grievous retreated. Bothui held. The battle was a tactical masterpiece. Anakin had turned a numerical disadvantage into an ambush that destroyed a significant portion of Grievous's fleet using ground vehicles repurposed as orbital gun emplacements. It was exactly the kind of improvised victory the Republic had come to depend on, but the celebration was short-lived. During the battle, Anakin's Jedi starfighter sustained heavy damage. R2-D2 was ejected from the droid socket and lost in the debris field. The astromech droid drifted among the wreckage of destroyed Separatist and Republic ships, powered down and unrecoverable in the chaos of the post-battle salvage operations. This would have been an acceptable loss if R2-D2 had been a standard astromech. He was not. Anakin had owned R2-D2 since before the Clone Wars. The droid had served aboard Padme's royal starship during the Naboo crisis. He had flown every combat mission Anakin had undertaken since Geonosis. He had been present for classified briefings aboard Republic capital ships, sitting in the corner of tactical rooms where fleet commanders discuss hyperspace routes, base coordinates, and force deployments. One droid held more strategic data than most fleet admirals. Standard military protocol required routine memory wipes for all droids operating in sensitive environments. The procedure was simple, the reasoning was obvious, and the regulation was clear. Anakin had never performed one in the entire war. R2-D2's memory banks contained a comprehensive and unencrypted record of Republic fleet movements, hyperspace routes, base coordinates, communication frequencies, and tactical doctrine. If the Separatists recovered that droid, they would gain a detailed map of every Republic military asset Anakin had interacted with since the war began. Fleet positions, patrol schedules, supply convoy routes, the locations of forward operating bases across the Outer Rim, all of it was stored inside a single astromech drifting in a debris field that both sides had the ability to salvage. Obi-Wan understood the danger immediately and reported the situation to the Jedi Council. The Council's response was clear. R2-D2 was to be considered compromise. Anakin was ordered to accept a replacement astromech and cease all recovery efforts. The Republic could not risk additional ships in the debris field for a single droid. The strategic calculation was sound, but Anakin refused to accept it. The replacement droid arrived quickly. R3-S6, designated by the Republic as a standard astromech unit, was assigned to Anakin's starfighter. The clones called him Goldie because of his gold-plated dome. Anakin disliked him immediately. R3 was clumsy in the starfighter's socket, slow to respond to commands, and prone to errors that a trained astromech should not have been making. Anakin attributed the problems to an inferior droid. He was wrong. R3-S6 was not malfunctioning, he was performing exactly as programmed. The replacement droid the Republic assigned to Anakin Skywalker was a Separatist intelligence agent. R3-S6 had been stolen from an industrial automaton production facility on the planet Nubia, reprogrammed by Separatist intelligence, and inserted into the Republic's supply chain. Every malfunction was deliberate. Every delay was calculated. From the moment R3 was installed in Anakin's starfighter, the Separatists had a direct line into one of the Republic's most active combat commands. The enemy was not outside the hull, it was in the cockpit. R3-S6 did not simply fail to perform, he actively sabotaged Republic operations. During a scouting mission, R3 activated a tracking beacon that transmitted Anakin's position to Grievous's forces. When Anakin engaged a Separatist patrol, R3 opened the wrong panels, delayed hyperspace calculations, and nearly got Anakin killed. Ahsoka noticed the pattern before anyone else did. She distrusted R3 from the beginning, though at the time she could not prove deliberate sabotage. Anakin dismissed her concerns. He was too focused on finding R2-D2 to consider that his replacement might be the bigger problem. Meanwhile, R2-D2 had been recovered from the Bothui debris field, but not by the Republic. Ga-Noct was a scavenger who recognized the Republic military markings on R2's chassis and understood that a droid recovered from a Jedi General starfighter might contain intelligence worth far more than its scrap value. He contacted General Grievous and offered to sell the droid. Grievous agreed immediately. The price was secondary. What mattered was the data inside R2-D2's memory banks. Every hour that passed R2 in Separatist hands was another hour in which Grievous' slicers could extract classified Republic data. Ganak transported R2-D2 to Skytop Station, a Separatist listening post built directly into the surface of a remote moon. The station was one of Grievous' primary intelligence gathering installations, monitoring Republic communications across multiple sectors and coordinating signal intercepts for the broader Separatist fleet. It was hidden from Republic sensor sweeps and protected by automated defenses. By the time Anakin tracked the droid's signal to the station, Grievous had already begun extracting data from R2-D2's memory banks. Anakin had disobeyed orders again. The Council had told him to abandon the search, and Obi-Wan had told him to let go. Anakin could not. He took Rex, Ahsoka, and a squad of clone troopers aboard the Twilight and launched an unauthorized infiltration of Skytop Station. The mission objective was simple: recover R2-D2 and destroy the listening post before Grievous could transmit the stolen intelligence to the broader Separatist network. Inside the station, the mission fractured into multiple engagements. Anakin went directly for R2-D2, Ahsoka led a team to plant charges in the station's reactor core, Rex and his clones provided security and held corridors against battle droid reinforcements. Every element of the operation was complicated by R3-S6. The spy droid had accompanied the strike team aboard Anakin's fighter, and once inside the station, R3 began actively working against the Republic forces. He sealed blast doors to trap Ahsoka's team, transmitted the strike team's positions to Grievous, and activated Vulture droid fighters in the station's hangar to cut off the Republic's escape route. Ahsoka confronted Grievous directly during the mission. The cyborg's general seized her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. The encounter was brief, as Grievous was faster and stronger, and Ahsoka was forced to retreat through the station's corridors while her clone escort engaged the general. She survived because she was quick enough to keep moving, and because Grievous had multiple threats to address simultaneously. The station was now rigged to explode, and Grievous had to choose between hunting a Padawan and saving his intelligence operation. Anakin reached R2-D2 in the station's data processing center. Ganak was dead, killed by Grievous after the data extraction was complete, rather than paid. R2-D2 was intact, but had been partially accessed. Anakin freed the droid and began fighting his way back towards the hangar. In the corridors near the exit, R2-D2 encountered R3-S6 directly. R2-D2 engaged R3 on the station's exterior hull plating, while the structure began to collapse around them. R2 destroyed R3-S6, ending the Separatist infiltration of Anakin's command. As depicted in the Season 1 episode Duel of the Droids, the strike team evacuated Skytop Station moments before the charges detonated. The listening post was destroyed. R2-D2 was recovered. The Republic's intelligence leak was sealed, but the damage assessment was incomplete. Grievous had already begun downloading R2's data before Anakin arrived. How much had been transmitted to the broader Separatist network remained unclear. Republic intelligence officers could not determine whether fleet positions had been compromised or whether Grievous had forwarded the extracted data to Dooku before the station fell. The uncertainty forced the Republic to assume the worst. Multiple fleet deployments were altered, patrol routes were reassigned, and communication frequencies across 3 sectors were cycled to new encryption standards. The operational costs of Anakin's attachment to a single droid rippled across the entire military command structure, and the deeper problem remained unaddressed. Anakin's refusal to follow standard protocol had created a vulnerability that nearly compromised the Republic's entire military posture. His refusal to wipe R2's memory, his refusal to accept a loss, had placed classified intelligence in enemy hands. The Council noted the incident but did not discipline him or enforce the memory wipe regulation. Anakin kept R2-D2 with his full memory intact, and the war continued. The intelligence war extended beyond droids and data. On the diplomatic front, the Separatists were exploiting the Republic's inability to protect its own allies, and one of Padme Amidala's oldest political relationships was about to fracture under the pressure. Senator Onaconda Farr of Rhodia had been a friend of the Naberi family for decades. Padme had known him since childhood and called him Uncle Ono. Rhodia was a swamp world in the Savarine sector of the Outer Rim, and by this point in the war, it was starving. The Republic had promised aid, supply convoys had been allocated, diplomatic assurances had been made, and none of it had arrived. The Separatists had disrupted Rodia's supply lanes, and the Republic Senate had been too slow to reroute relief shipments through alternative corridors. Farr had appealed to the Senate multiple times. He had spoken on the floor and filed formal requests through the proper channels. Each time, the response was the same. The aid was coming. The situation was being addressed. The Republic had not forgotten its allies, but the food shipments never arrived. Farr's people were dying, and his appeals to the Senate had produced nothing but delays and empty assurances. The Republic did not lose Rodia through military defeat. It nearly lost it through delay. Newt Gunray saw an opportunity. The Trade Federation Viceroy contacted Farr directly and offered a simple arrangement. Rodia would declare for the Separatists. In exchange, the Trade Federation would provide the food, medicine, and military protection the Republic had failed to deliver. Farr did not want to betray the Republic. He was a principal senator who had served in the Galactic Senate for years, but his planet was starving, and principals did not feed people. He agreed. Padme traveled to Rodia on a diplomatic visit, unaware of Farr's arrangement with the Separatists. When she arrived, she walked into a trap. Farr had agreed to hand Padme over to Gunray as part of the deal. Gunray wanted her personally. Padme had been a persistent obstacle to the Trade Federation's political ambitions since the Naboo blockade, and Gunray had carried a personal grudge against her for over a decade. Farr did not want to do it. He wrestled with the decision, but Gunray's terms were non-negotiable. Padme for supplies. The capture failed. Padme was taken into custody, but the operation fell apart almost immediately. Jar Jar Binks had accompanied Padme to Rodia as a representative of the Senate. He was not a soldier, he was not a Jedi, but when the Separatist droids moved to secure the area, Jar Jar stumbled into the swamps surrounding Farr's compound. What followed was a chain of events that no one on either side had planned for. A Quazel Maw, a massive aquatic predator native to Rodia's marshlands, surfaced from the swamp waters and attacked the Separatist battle droids. Jar Jar, riding the creature through the compound, was mistaken by Farr's guards for a Jedi because of the destruction he had caused. The chaos was enough to break the Separatist hold on the compound. Padme freed herself from custody and reached Farr's chambers. She confronted the senator directly. Farr broke down. He admitted what he had done and why. He told her about the starvation, the unanswered requests for aid, the children on Rodia who had not eaten in days, while the Republic Senate debated supply allocations. Padme understood his desperation. She did not excuse the betrayal, but she recognized what had driven it. Farr had acted out of love for his people. That did not change the fact that he had handed a Republic senator to a war criminal. Together, they turn on Gunray. Farr's guards seal the compound. Padme captured the Viceroy personally, while clone reinforcements arrived to secure the prisoner. The Republic now held a senior member of the Separatist Council in custody for the first time in the war. Gunray was a founding member of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the leader of the Trade Federation, and a direct subordinate of Count Dooku. His capture was the most significant intelligence achievement of Year One. The tactical and strategic information Gunray possessed, if extracted through interrogation, could have exposed Separatist supply networks, fleet dispositions, and political alliances across hundreds of systems. But the circumstances of the capture reveal something the Republic preferred not to examine. Farr had defected because the Republic had abandoned Rodia, not through malice, through bureaucratic paralysis. The Senate had voted to send aid, but the aid had not arrived. The supply lanes were contested, and the military resources needed to protect relief convoys were committed elsewhere. Rodia was not the only world caught in this gap between promise and delivery. Across the Outer Rim, systems that had remained loyal to the Republic were watching their allies starve while the Senate debated allocation formulas. Every world that the Republic failed to supply was a world the Separatists could recruit. 3 vulnerabilities defined the intelligence war of Year One: attachment, delay, infiltration. The first was ethical: stolen droids, spy infiltrators, and compromised data networks. R2-D2 was the most valuable piece of military hardware Anakin carried into combat, and the Republic had no system to prevent a single droid's capture from becoming a fleet-wide security breach. R3-S6 demonstrated that the Separatists could insert agents directly into the Republic's supply chain, bypassing every checkpoint between the factory floor and the cockpit of a Jedi General starfighter. The second was diplomatic, senators betraying alliances under economic pressure. Farr's defection was not an anomaly. It was a preview of what would happen to every Outer Rim world the Republic failed to supply. The third was structural. The Republic's own attachments created vulnerabilities that a disciplined intelligence apparatus would have prevented. Anakin would not wipe R2's memory because he loved the droid. Farr would not refuse Gunray because he loved his people. Padme traveled to Rhodia without military escort because she trusted a friend. Each decision was human and understandable, and each one created an opening the Separatists exploited. The Republic had captured Newt Gunray. It had recovered R2-D2. It had destroyed a Separatist listening post and eliminated a spy droid embedded in one of its most sensitive commands. On paper, the intelligence war of Year One ended in the Republic's favor. Every crisis had been resolved, every asset had been recovered, but the structural weaknesses that produce each crisis remained untouched. Anakin still refused memory wipes, the Senate still could not deliver aid to allied worlds on time, and the Republic's intelligence apparatus still had no systematic method for detecting compromised personnel or infiltrated droids. The system that allowed R3-S6 to reach Anakin's cockpit was the same system that would process the next replacement droid and the one after that. Gunray was in Republic custody. Holding him would prove to be far more difficult than capturing him. The Separatists did not abandon their leaders, and the woman Dooku would send to recover the Viceroy had already proven she could cut through anything the Republic put in her way. The Republic had won the intelligence war of Year One, but every victory had exposed a vulnerability. The stolen droid, the spy replacement, the starving ally, the captured Viceroy, each one had been a warning. The Republic treated them as closed cases. The war would prove otherwise. Chapter 8: Chasing Shadows. The Republic had Newt Gunray in custody, a founding member of the Separatist Council, the leader of the Trade Federation, a man who had been present at the creation of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, who carried inside his head the operational details of a government at war. His capture on Rhodia had been the single most significant intelligence achievement of Year One. If the Republic could transport him to Coruscant, interrogate him, and extract what he knew, the war's entire trajectory could shift. The Jedi Council assigned two of its own to ensure that happened. The Republic captured Newt Gunray on Rhodia and placed him aboard one of its most heavily defended cruisers with a Jedi Master and a Padawan standing guard. He was free again within a day. Master Luminara Unduli and Ahsoka Tano escorted Gunray aboard the Tranquility, a Republic cruiser operating under full wartime security protocols. Senate Commandos, the elite guard unit assigned to protect high-value Republic assets, reinforced the ship's clone detachment. Commander Gree oversaw the military complement, and the Tranquility operated as a secure transport in Republic-controlled space with a Jedi General in command. By every standard measure, Gunray should have reached Coruscant without incident. Count Dooku had no intentions of allowing that to happen. The Separatist leader contacted his master, Darth Sidious, and informed him that he intended to send Asajj Ventress to recover Gunray. Sidious was skeptical. He questioned whether Ventress was capable of infiltrating a Republic cruiser and extracting a prisoner from Jedi custody. Dooku assured him that Ventress was sufficient for the task. Sidious permitted the operation. The exchange was remarkable for what it revealed. The Sith Lord who controlled the Republic was receiving a briefing from the Sith Lord who controlled the Rebellion about an operation targeting a Republic prisoner transport. Sidious could have warned the Jedi or increased the Tranquility's escort. He did nothing. The prisoner's escape served his purposes as much as his capture had. Ventress boarded the Tranquility through the dorsal hull. A Separatist frigate had engaged the cruiser's escorts as a diversion, drawing fire and attention away from the upper decks. Ventress arrived with a Vulture droid escort aboard a Drakh-class boarding ship that pierced the cruiser's top hull plating. Once inside, She planted thermal detonators in key structural points throughout the upper decks and began working her way towards the detention level. The Senate commandos responded. Several died in the corridors before they could form a defensive line, and Ventress moved through them without slowing down. Luminara intercepted Ventress in the ship's engine room. The Jedi Master was confident. She had studied Ventress's file and assessed her as an undisciplined assassin who relied on aggression rather than technique. Luminara told Ahsoka to guard Gunray and engage Ventress alone. It was a mistake. Ventress fought with trained precision. Dooku had shaped her technique, and Dooku had been trained by Yoda. The ferocity Luminara encountered was not reckless, it was calculated. The duel moved through the engine room and into the lower corridors. Ventress detonated her thermal charges mid-fight, blowing open bulkheads and creating chaos across multiple decks. Luminara was nearly killed when a blast door sealed her inside a collapsing compartment. She survived, but the delay cost her the engagement. Ventress reached the detention level. Ahsoka held her ground. She engaged Ventress directly outside Gunray's cell. The Padawan fought well, but Ventress was stronger and more experienced. Ahsoka was pushed back. The fight bought time, but it did not stop the rescue. The killing blow came from inside the Republic's own ranks. Senate Commando Captain Argaius had been bribed by Count Dooku before the mission began. Argaius was a Republic officer, a member of the Senate's own elite guard, hand-selected for high security assignments. The man had served the Republic for years, and he had been turned. While Luminara and Ahsoka fought Ventress, Argaius killed his own men in the detention block, freed Gunray from his cell, and escorted the Viceroy to an escape pod. Commander Greed tried to stop him. Argaius overpowered the clone commander and told him that a clone would never understand. He wanted a life with more than empty servitude. The Republic's elite guard could be bought. Gunray and Argaius escaped the Tranquility aboard a Republic frigate that Ventress had commandeered during the assault. Ventress met them in the hangar. She had fought 2 Jedi, destroyed sections of a capital ship, and extracted a high-value prisoner from one of the most secure transports in the Republic fleet. When Argaius began boasting about his role in the escape, Ventress killed him. She drove her lightsaber through his chest without a word. The Separatists did not share credit. Argaius had been a tool. His usefulness was over. The Tranquility incident exposed a vulnerability the Republic had never seriously addressed. Its own officers could be bought. The Senate commandos were supposed to be incorruptible, the Republic's last line of internal security. Argaius proved that the line was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. The Jedi Council reviewed the incident. They noted Luminara's tactical error in underestimating Ventress. Ahsoka's performance under pressure was also reviewed, but no broader counterintelligence review of the Senate Commando Corps followed. The betrayal was treated as an isolated incident. It was not. This was embarrassing. Gunray's escape triggered an immediate pursuit. Republic intelligence tracked the Viceroy's transponder signal to the third moon of Vasek, a desolate volcanic world in the Outer Rim. The signal appeared to be coming from a fortified structure on the moon's surface. The Jedi Council dispatched Kit Fisto, a Nautolan Jedi Master and veteran of Geonosis, to investigate. Fisto brought his former Padawan Nadar Veb, a Mon Calamari Jedi Knight who had been recently promoted during the wartime knighting ceremonies. Veb was eager to prove himself. That eagerness would cost him his life. The signal was a trap. As depicted in the Season 1 episode Lair of Grievous, the fortress on Vasek's third moon held no Separatist prisoner. It was General Grievous's personal lair. The structure had been built into the volcanic rock of the moon itself, reinforced with blast doors, surveillance systems, and automated defenses. Grievous used it as a private retreat between campaigns. The interior displayed trophies taken from Jedi and Republic officers Grievous had killed. Lightsabers mounted on walls, masks arranged in alcoves, the remnants of warriors who had not survived their encounters with the cyborg general. Gunray's transponder signal had been deliberately routed to Grievous's lair. Count Dooku had arranged the entire scenario. Not to protect Gunray, not to ambush the Jedi, Dooku had designed the encounter as a performance evaluation for Grievous. The general had failed at the Malevolence. He had failed at Bothawi. He had failed at Skytop Station. Dooku wanted to see whether his military commander could still kill Jedi. Fisto and Veb entered the fortress expecting to find Gunray. They found Grievous instead. The general arrived shortly after the Jedi breached the outer defenses, descending into his own fortress through a private entrance. His IG-100 Magna Guards engaged the Jedi first, followed by waves of battle droids cycling through the lair's corridors. Grievous was angry. Intruders had entered his home, and his trophies were at risk. And Dooku was watching through hidden surveillance feeds, evaluating every move Grievous made. The confrontation escalated through multiple levels of the fortress. Fisto and Veb fought through Grievous's pet Rogwart, a massive armored beast the general kept as a guard animal in the lower chambers. They destroyed it. They pushed deeper into the lair, searching for an exit, while Grievous sealed corridors and rerouted them through kill zones designed to give him every advantage. The fortress was his territory. Every blast door, every corridor junction, every surveillance camera fed into a system Grievous controlled. The Jedi were not hunting the general. The general was hunting them. Nadar Veb made a critical error. Fisto ordered a retreat. The lair was compromised. The mission parameters had changed, and continuing deeper into Grievous's fortress with no reinforcements and no extraction plan was tactically indefensible. Veb refused. The young knight had been promoted during the war. He had trained to fight, and he wanted to prove himself against a target worthy of his abilities. Veb broke from Fisto's position and pursued Grievous alone through the upper corridors. Grievous was waiting for him. The general killed Nadar Veb in single combat. It was not close. Kit Fisto barely escaped. The Nautolan Master fought his way to the landing platform and reached his starfighter under fire from Grievous's automated turrets. Fisto made it off the moon alive, but he left his former Padawan's body behind in the fortress. The mission had accomplished nothing. Gunray was not on Vasek, and Grievous remained free. A Jedi Knight was dead, and Dooku, watching the entire engagement through his surveillance feed, contacted Grievous afterward with a single assessment. There was room for improvement. The parallel between Dooku's evaluation and the Kaminoan training system was precise. The Sith tested their generals the way Kamino tested its clones, through survival. Nadar Veb had not survived. In Dooku's calculus, that meant Grievous still needed refinement. In the Jedi Council's calculus, it meant another name added to the war's growing casualty list. Neither institution stopped to ask what it cost. The Republic's hunt for Separatist leadership had now produced two failures in rapid succession. Gunray had been captured and lost within a single day. The pursuit of his signal had led to a trap that killed a Jedi Knight. This was costly. The pattern was becoming clear. The Separatist leadership did not stay captured, and hunting them on their own terms, in their own territory, cost the lives the Republic could not replace. The third attempt appeared briefly to be different. Count Dooku himself fell into Republic hands, not through a Jedi operation, not through military action, through a pirate. This was not a field victory. This was the war in a cell. Hondo Ohnaka commanded a gang of Weequay pirates operating from a base on the planet Florum. Hondo was a survivor, an opportunist, and a pragmatist who had built a profitable operation raiding cargo shipments in the Outer Rim. He maintained contacts in both the Republic and the Confederacy, held no loyalty to either side, and it treated the conflict as a business opportunity. Count Dooku's Solar Sailor had crashed on the nearby planet Vancor following a pursuit by Anakin and Obi-Wan. Hondo's crew found the Sith Lord amid the wreckage on Vancor and offered him passage to Florum. Once there, they took his lightsabers and locked him in a cell. Hondo had captured one of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy through salvage rights and opportunism. The ransom demand reached Coruscant within hours. Hondo wanted 1 million credits in spice. The price was irrelevant. The Republic was being offered the leader of the Separatist movement and the head of the Confederacy's military command. The man who had orchestrated every campaign of Year One delivered without a single Republic soldier firing a shot. Chancellor Palpatine authorized the payment. The Jedi Council sent Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi to Florum to verify that Dooku was actually in custody before the ransom was delivered. Anakin and Obi-Wan confirmed the capture. Dooku was alive, imprisoned in Hondo's compound, restrained by an energy field that suppressed his connection to the Force. The Sith Lord was furious, but contained. For the first time in the war, the Republic had its enemy's supreme commander in a cage. The verification was transmitted to Coruscant, and the ransom convoy was launched. What followed was a cascade of failures that destroyed the Republic's best chance to end the war. Hondo was generous with his guests. He invited Anakin and Obi-Wan to a banquet celebrating the deal. The Jedi accepted. The drinks were drugged. Anakin and Obi-Wan switched their cups with a weak white pirates, avoiding the spiked drinks. But Hondo's monkey lizard, Pilf Mukmuk, released gas into the room. Both Jedi were incapacitated. They woke up in a cell next to Dooku, shackled together with the very prisoner they had come to collect. The Republic's verification team was now imprisoned alongside the target. Hondo considered it an upgrade. 3 prisoners meant the ransom could be renegotiated. The ransom convoy arrived under the command of Senator Karras, a veteran Republic diplomat, accompanied by a clone detachment led by Commander Stone and Representative Jar Jar Binks. The convoy carried the full payment in spice. It should have been a straightforward exchange. It was not. Turk Falso, one of Hondo's most trusted lieutenants, had decided that the ransom was worth more than his loyalty to the pirate chief. Turk ordered a fellow pirate to shoot down the Republic convoy as it approached Florum. The transport shuttle carrying Senator Karras was hit. Karras died in the crash, and the clone pilots were killed on impact. The spice shipment scattered across the surface of the Doshar fields. Turk then returned to Hondo's compound and lied to his captain's face, claiming that the Republic had sent an army instead of a ransom payment. Hondo, believing Turk's report, mobilized his pirates to defend the compound. The situation collapsed into chaos on multiple fronts simultaneously. Anakin and Obi-Wan escaped their cell during the confusion and fought through Hondo's corridors towards the landing platform. Jar Jar, leading the surviving clones from the crashed shuttle, stumbled toward the compound from the opposite direction. In the resulting engagement, Jar Jar accidentally rammed a commandeered pirate tank into the base's main power supply lines. The explosion knocked out power across the compound, deactivating security systems, energy fields, and containment barriers simultaneously. Dooku was free. The power failure had disabled his cell suppression field. The Sith Lord wasted no time. Through the Force, Dooku manipulated Turk Falso into killing his own pirate accomplice, then choked Turk to death as the traitor tried to flee with stolen spice. Dooku then commandeered a Flare Star-class attack shuttle on the landing platform and escaped Florum before either the Republic or Hondo's pirates could react. The Republic's best chance to end the war through a single capture had evaporated because a pirate lieutenant got greedy and a power supply took a direct hit from a stolen tank. Senator Karras was dead. The ransom was lost. Dooku was free. Anakin and Obi-Wan returned to Coruscant with nothing to show for the mission except bruised pride and a diplomatic incident with a pirate gang the Republic could not afford to antagonize. This was catastrophic. The hunt for Separatist leadership in Year 1 followed a pattern so consistent it cannot be a coincidence. Gunray was captured on Rhodia and feared from the tranquility within a day. The pursuit of Gunray's signal led to Vassek, where a Jedi Knight died in a trap calibrated as a performance review. Dooku was captured on Florum and escaped through a chain of betrayals and accidents that no one on either side had controlled. Grievous had escaped at Bathory, at the Malevolence, at Rishi Station, and at Skytop Station. Ventress had escaped every management she had entered since the war began. The Republic could win battles. It could hold planets. It could destroy superweapons and break blockades and secure hyperspace lanes, but it cannot capture and hold the people running the war. Every Separatist leader who fell into Republic hands eventually walked free. Every pursuit led to a dead end, a trap, or a catastrophe that cost the Republic more than it gained. This was not a coincidence. It was a structure. The war was not designed to end with a decisive capture. It was designed to continue. Sidious needed both sides fighting. Dooku had to remain free and command the Separatists, and Grievous had to remain free to terrorize the Republic. Sidious needed the war to grind forward, eroding the Senate's independence, deepening the Jedi's entanglement, and consolidating his own emergency powers with every new crisis. A captured Dooku would have ended the Confederacy. A dead Grievous would have crippled Separatist military operations. Neither outcome served the man controlling both sides. The Republic sent its best generals, its most skilled operatives, and its most trusted diplomats to end the war by capturing the enemy's leadership. It sent Luminara Unduli and Ahsoka Tano to guard Gunray. It sent Kit Fisto and Nadar Veb to track him. It sent Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi to collect Dooku. Every mission failed, and every leader escaped. And after every failure, the war continued exactly as it had before. Year 1 ended without a single Separatist leader in Republic custody. Not Gunray, not Dooku, not Grievous, not Ventress. The Republic had fought across dozens of systems, lost hundreds of Jedi and thousands of clones, and the enemy's command structure remained completely intact. The war had not been won, it had not even been dented, and that was exactly how it was designed. Chapter 9: Blueprint of Empire. The war's first year was over. The Republic had fought across dozens of star systems, from the arena floor of Geonosis to the swamps of Rodea, from the coral moon of Ragoza to the pirate compounds of Florum. It had defeated a superweapon, secured the Hutt Treaty, and held the Outer Rim through sacrifice and diplomacy. It had proven that its clone soldiers could fight, adapt, and die with a courage that no training program could manufacture, and it had failed completely and without exception to capture a single leader of the enemy government. But the war's purpose had never been victory. The war's purpose was construction, and by the end of Year 1, the architecture was complete. Every emergency power the Galactic Senate granted Palpatine in Year 1 was still in effect when he dissolved the Republic and declared himself Emperor. Not one was revoked. Not one was challenged. Not one was even reviewed. The chain of command told the entire story. The Grand Army of the Republic answered to the Supreme Chancellor. The Jedi Order answered to the Grand Army. The Senate had ceded military authority to one man in a single vote, proposed by a junior representative from Naboo who had been manipulated into speaking on behalf of an absent senator. That vote was never revisited. The Military Creation Act, the legislation that would have placed the Army under formal Senate oversight with appropriations committees and command review boards, was never passed. Palpatine's emergency powers made it unnecessary. The Army that fought Year 1 was not authorized by democratic process. It was authorized by one man's signature, and that man was Darth Sidious. No senator ever introduced a motion to rescind the emergency powers. The senator's role in Year 1 had been reduced to spectator. Senators debated supply allocations while planets starved. They voted on relief packages that arrived too late to matter and sent diplomats to negotiate ransoms that were never collected. Senator Karras died on Florum carrying spice to pay a pirate for a prisoner who escaped before the payment could be delivered. Senator Farr nearly defected to the Separatists because the Republic could not feed his people. The Senate functioned. It simply did not function fast enough to matter. And with every delay, with every failure, the argument for centralized authority grew stronger. Palpatine did not need to seize power. The Senate handed it to him, one emergency at a time. Each crisis produced a new resolution granting the Chancellor broader executive authority, and each resolution expired on paper but was never formally rescinded. The emergency became permanent because no one could agree on when the emergency had ended. The Jedi Order had entered the war as the Republic's moral authority. By the end of Year 1, it had become the Republic's military infrastructure. Roughly 183 of the 212 Jedi sent to Geonosis never came home. Ima Gundy fell on Ryloth defending refugees the Senate had not yet authorized him to help, and Nadar Veb died on Vasek in a fortress calibrated as a performance evaluation for a Separatist general, and the Jedi who questioned the war's morality were silenced. Prasid Dibbs was a Jedi Master who served under Mace Windu on a mission to Hisrich during the opening weeks of the war. Dibbs witnessed the civilian costs of the Republic's military operations and challenged Windu directly. He argued that the Jedi had abandoned their mandate by becoming soldiers in a conflict that served political interests rather than the will of the Force. Windu did not engage the argument. The Jedi Council court-martialed Dibs, and Ki-Adi-Mundi delivered the verdict. Dibs was reassigned to the archives, removed from active service. The dissent was documented, but the underlying question was never addressed. Mil Alabeth, another Jedi who served with Anakin during the same period, asked him why peacekeepers carried weapons. Anakin had no answer. The Council demanded unity from an order that was fracturing under the weight of a war it had never been built to fight. Unity, in practice, meant silence. The contradictions were visible to anyone willing to look. Mace Windu had told Palpatine that the Jedi were keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Weeks later, Windu was leading combat operations on Hisrich with a full clone battalion at his command. Yoda had told 3 clones on Rugosa that the Force resided in all living things, but the order that employed those clones had never asked whether the Force's presence in them entitled them to freedom. The Jedi Temple itself sat atop an ancient Sith shrine whose dark energy had been seeping upward through the foundations for 1,000 years. The Order could not sense the dark side closing around it because the dark side had been beneath its feet the entire time. Barriss Offee had fought at Geonosis. She survived, but the experience planted something in her that the Jedi Council did not detect and could not have treated if it had. Offee's disillusionment with the Order would deepen over the next 2 years, until it culminated in an act of terrorism against the Jedi Temple itself. That event lay ahead, but its roots were in Year 1, in the arena on Geonosis, in the moment a Padawan watched her order transform from peacekeepers into generals and understood that something fundamental had broken. The clones occupied the war's most precarious position. They fought. They bled. They died in numbers the Republic never fully disclosed. And at the end of Year 1, the institution they served had still not determined whether they were citizens or equipment. Slick had called the Jedi slaveholders on Christophsis, and the Republic filed the report and moved on. Clone 99 had proven on Kamino that worth transcended combat utility, and the training system had classified him as defective. Heavy had sacrificed himself on Rishi Station to save the entire cloning facility, and the Republic's official records logged the destruction of the listening post as an infrastructure loss. His name did not appear in the report. Rex wore Jaeguys on his helmet, a Mandalorian combat honor, because his instructors had recognized what he was. Cody commanded the 212th with a tactical precision that rivaled any Jedi general, and Echo and Fives had earned their places in the 501st through loss and survival. The Republic treated every clone as government property. Clones had no citizenship, they had no legal standing to refuse an order, request reassignment, or challenge their conditions of service. They could not vote, own property, or leave military service, and the Kaminoans who manufactured them retained proprietary control over the cloning process itself. The clones existed in a legal void between sentient beings and military hardware, and the Republic preferred to leave that void unresolved. Defining clones as people would have required granting them rights. Granting them rights would have required acknowledging that the Republic was fighting its war with an enslaved army. No senator introduced legislation, and no committee held hearings. The question was raised in Year 1, deferred, and never formally answered. If they were property, Order 66 would not be murder. It would be activation. Yoda had declared on Rugosa that the Force resided in every clone. The Republic never followed through on what that declaration meant. If the Force resided in them, they were living beings with a claim to self-determination. If they were living beings with a claim to self-determination, then the Republic was fighting its war with an army of conscripts who had never been asked whether they wanted to fight. The inhibitor chips were inside every clone who fought Year 1, every trooper who served under Anakin, under Obi-Wan, under Plo Koon, under Luminara, under Kit Fisto. Every clone who had earned a name, painted his armor, carved a mark into his chestplate. The chips did not care about names. They did not care about loyalty. They waited. And buried inside every clone, implanted past the 3rd stage of embryonic development, a biochip waited. The Kaminoans had performed the implantation themselves. Darth Tyrannus, operating under the identity of a Jedi benefactor, had deceived Lama Su and Nala Se into believing the chips were Sifo-Dyas' original safety measure against rogue Jedi. The Sith had not infiltrated the cloning facility. They had manipulated it from the outside. The Kaminoans implanted the chips willingly, believing they served a Jedi-authorized purpose. The chips were undetected by the Jedi and by the clones themselves, programmed with a single contingency order that would, when activated, turn every soldier in the Grand Army against the generals who led them. The men who had saved the Republic would one day be ordered to destroy it. Anakin Skywalker stood at the center of every thread the war had woven, a 19-year-old Jedi Knight secretly married to a senator whose political career depended on the same democracy that Palpatine was dismantling. Carrying the unprocessed trauma of the Tusken Massacre, a confession he had delivered not to his master, not to the Jedi Council, but to the Chancellor. Palpatine had responded the way the Jedi never would have. Where the Council would have demanded accountability and discipline, Palpatine offered understanding. Where Obi-Wan would have expressed horror and disappointment, Palpatine offered absolution. The Chancellor told Anakin that his anger was natural, that his power was extraordinary, that the loss he had suffered was not his fault. Every word was calculated, every assurance widened the distance between Anakin and the order that had raised him. The bond between them deepened with every conversation, every private audience, every moment Palpatine treated him as the son the Jedi Order had refused to let him be. The Council had given Anakin a Padawan. Yoda had crafted the assignment deliberately: teach Anakin to care for someone, and then let go. Ahsoka Tano was 14 years old when she arrived on Christophsis. By the end of Year 1, she had fought at Teth, at the Malevolence, at Skytop Station, at the Tranquility, and on Vasek's moon alongside Kit Fisto. She had disobeyed orders to save Plo Koon, face Grievous and Ventress, and survive both. Yoda's lesson was working. Anakin was learning to care. The problem was that Anakin had never learned to let go of anything, and now he had one more person he could not afford to lose. Every bond that would destroy Anakin Skywalker was forming in Year 1. His marriage to Padme, his dependence on Palpatine, his attachment to Ahsoka, his loyalty to Rex and the 501st, his refusal to accept loss, demonstrated when he disobeyed the Council to recover a single astromech droid rather than accept that some things could not be saved. The Jedi had trained him to release attachment. The war had taught him to hold tighter. The Separatists had accomplished exactly what they needed to accomplish. Dooku's grand strategy of severing the Outer Rim from the core through hyperspace lane control had forced the Republic to spread its forces across an impossible number of fronts. Neutral systems had been pressured, invaded, or economically strangled into compliance. The Republic had secured the Hutt Treaty, but the cost of maintaining those supply lines consumed military resources that could have been deployed elsewhere. Every member of the Separatist Council survived Year 1 intact. The Confederacy's military command structure was untouched. Grievous was free. Ventress was free. Dooku was free. The war had created exactly the chaos Sidious needed to justify further centralization of power. And Sidious controlled all of it, both sides, every variable. The Chancellor who sent the Jedi to war was the Sith Master who had engineered the war's existence. The man who authorized the clone army was the same man whose agents had deceived the Kaminoans into implanting the chips that would turn that army into executioners. And the leader who dispatched Anakin to rescue Padme from the Malevolence had personally sent Padme into its path. Every victory the Republic celebrated in Year 1 had been permitted by Sidious. Every defeat the Republic suffered had been arranged by him. The war was a closed system, and he held every key. Year 1 did not decide the Clone Wars. It was never meant to. Year 1 built the framework that would end the Republic. The emergency powers that would become permanent, the Jedi generals who would be targeted by Order 66, and the clone soldiers who carried the chips that would execute it. The Senate that had surrendered its authority one vote at a time, and the boy who trusted the wrong man. The galaxy could not see the trap, because the trap was the system itself. The war's second year would test every institution Year 1 had compromised. The Republic would return to Geonosis with a force large enough to take the planet. Mandalore would fracture under Separatist pressure and the shadow of a returning Sith Lord. The Senate's corruption would deepen as banking deregulation funded both sides of the conflict. Ahsoka Tano would grow from a reckless Padawan into a battlefield commander, and Anakin Skywalker would take another step towards the man waiting for him in the shadows. Everything that followed, every betrayal, every order, every death, was set in motion in these opening months. The war did not start at Geonosis. It started a decade earlier, in the mind of one man. And by the end of Year 1, that man controlled everything. The Republic, the Separatists, the Jedi, the clones, the boy. He did not conquer the galaxy, he guided it into collapse. The galaxy just did not know it yet. If you made it this far, you already know this war was designed to get worse. Subscribe and turn on notifications for Part 2, where everything the Republic built in Year 1 begins to collapse.